Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. He stayed to face Itachi Uchiha, or Orochimaru, and the masked man. He stayed for Denzo and his secret army, watching from the shadows like a venomous snake. Because this was his forge. This was where he would refine his power in the heat of life and death battle. Rather than scrambling to survive on the night of the massacre, he would prepare. Here and now. As nearly 100 jutsu rained down on him, Haru's expression remained calm. He began forming hand seals. Wood style, wood dragon jutsu. From beneath his feet, an enormous tree burst from the earth. It expanded rapidly, growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. A moment later, it took shape. A colossal dragon of living wood, towering nearly 100 meters high, its form rippling with power. The dragon coiled protectively around Haru, snarling with ancient might. That's the wood style of the first Hokage. When did the Uchiha master wood style? Even Denzo couldn't suppress the shock in his voice. Wood style. The bloodline of Senju Hashirama. The legendary first Hokage and god of shinobi. For decades, Denzo had experimented in secret, pouring time and resources into unlocking the mysteries of wood style. All he'd achieved were pitiful fragments. Far from the power wielded by Hashirama. And yet, now he was witnessing it. Flawless, majestic. Cast by Uchiha. By this Uchiha. Haru Uchiha performed it with ease. Unfathomable power emanating from his frame. The initial shock in Denzo's expression gave way to something darker. Greed. Possesses the Mangekyo Sharingan. And wood style. Haru Uchiha. This boy is a treasure. Denzo narrowed his eyes and gave an order to the 2 root operatives flanking him. Go. Capture him. Bring me the body. Alive or dead. The 2 shinobi nodded without a word and vanished into the shadows. On the other side of the battlefield, Orochimaru's golden eyes glinted coldly. He'd long since marked Haru Uchiha as his personal target. Mangekyo Sharingan. Wood style. That beautiful, perfect body. Excellent. Marvelous. A vessel like this. He could surpass every limit he'd ever known. But not yet. His instincts screamed that Haru wouldn't fall here. The time wasn't right. And far away, beneath his mask, Itachi Uchiha's expression darkened with a strange mix of awe and loneliness. He'd once thought Haru was merely on par with him. But now, after watching him unleash power after power. Izanagi. Wood style. Impossibly deep chakra reserves. It was overwhelming. Itachi Uchiha, once hailed as a prodigy of the Uchiha clan and all of Hidden Leaf Village. The one everyone else tried to chase. Now, he was the one struggling to catch up. The masked man, too, remained silent. But behind that spiral pattern mask, thoughts churned. He wasn't just surprised. He was impressed. If someone like Haru Uchiha could be recruited, turned into an ally, it would be a tremendous gain. Back on the battlefield, the wooden dragon coiled into the air, its vast body shielding Haru from the storm of elemental ninjutsu. The root ninja's attacks slammed into the dragon in waves. Boom. Boom. Shockwaves thundered across the battlefield. Flames and lightning burst against wood reinforced by nature chakra. The sky filled with smoke and fire. And at the center of it all, untouched, unmoving, stood Haru Uchiha. Chapter 32, He Knows Wood Style? The plan begins. How's it going? Is it over? Maybe. No one could survive that kind of attack. Their experience told them that no matter how strong someone was, no one could withstand a simultaneous assault from nearly 100 elite shinobi. Yet, they'd seen it with their own eyes. Haru Uchiha had clearly been bitten and struck down on the spot, but for some inexplicable reason, he had somehow come back. Resurrected, alive. No one was sure if he had truly survived. All eyes were fixed on the center of the battlefield, where he had stood. But the smoke from the massive explosion was too thick to see through. Even Itachi Uchiha with his powerful Sharingan, The masked man with Kami, and several root operatives equipped with Byakugan could only make out vague outlines. None of them could see clearly. Suddenly, the masked man moved. His body began to fade, slipping into the distorted spiral of the Kamyu dimension. Itachi Uchiha and Orochimaru immediately activated the teleportation jutsu and retreated. Scatter. He's alive. A root ninja with Byakugan recoiled, shocked. What? All the root shinobi, even Denzo, were stunned and started to retreat. But in that moment, the earth beneath their feet erupted. Countless trees burst from the ground, rising like monstrous serpents. Thick, powerful branches whipped around and coiled upward in a frenzied dance. Many root operatives were entangled before they could react, trapped and unable to move. Some ninjas tried to help their comrades, launching attacks and performing ninjutsu to cut through the branches. But nothing worked. Their efforts were in vain. Instead, those who tried to help were quickly overwhelmed and trapped as well, the tree trunks binding them tightly. Seeing this, Denzo quickly ordered a tactical retreat, instructing the remaining root ninjas to abandon rescue efforts and fall back to a safer position. The gray smoke at the center of the battlefield slowly began to clear. Haru Uchiha's figure emerged. He stood tall and solitary, arms folded behind his back. His Mangekyo Sharingan glowed crimson, exuding a mesmerizing, almost hypnotic aura. Around him lay the shattered remains of a colossal wooden dragon. Its once indomitable body, like hardened molten iron, was now nothing but debris scattered across the battlefield. The technique he had used was none other than wood-style, wood dragon technique. Facing an ambush from nearly 100 shinobi, even with top-tier taijutsu and reflexes, it was impossible to dodge everything using only the teleportation jutsu. The only option was absolute defense. So he had summoned the legendary technique of the first Hokage. Senju Hashirama's wood-style, wood dragon. A jutsu that had once subdued even the Night Ales. In Haru's hands, backed by his Kage-level strength, it had withstood the full barrage of Root's combined assault. A glimmer of satisfaction flickered in Haru's eyes. In the last simulation, even though he hadn't died from a similar attack, he had suffered injuries. But now, while the wood dragon was obliterated, he remained completely unharmed. Only a large amount of chakra had been consumed. What? He's not even injured? How is that possible? He took that entire barrage head-on. The nearby root operatives, now positioned on the perimeter, were stunned. Survival was one thing. But to emerge unscathed? That was unthinkable. Not even Denzo or the current Hokage could do that. Denzo, the masked man, Orochimaru, and Itachi all wore grim expressions. Could it be Izanagi again? Otherwise, how could he have lived? It was incomprehensible. Don't panic. He must be exhausted. No one can survive that kind of attack without paying a heavy price. Denzo narrowed his eyes. Even if someone could do it, it shouldn't be Haru Uchiha. As the leader of Root, Denzo was familiar with the true titans of the shinobi world. Like the legendary Senju Hashirama, or Madara Uchiha. Those were men capable of single-handedly withstanding attacks from thousands. But Haru? He was powerful, yes. But not on that level. Ordinary Uchiha need to sacrifice a Sharingan to use Izanagi. Itachi added in a cold voice. The only reason Haru hasn't lost an eye is because Izanagi must be his Mangekyo Sharingan's innate technique. But even so, such a powerful eye technique must have limits. Itachi spoke from personal experience. As one of the few with the Mangekyo Sharingan, he understood the devastating toll its techniques could have. Sakaimi, for example, could backfire if overused. Overexerting the Sharingan brought irreversible damage. Haru had already used Izanagi once. To use it again so soon? There had to be consequences. The masked man's expression remained stoic under his mask, but inwardly, he harbored doubt. This matter struck close to home. He too possessed a Mangekyo Sharingan. But not the eternal version. Yet he could use Kami frequently with little backlash. Why? Because he had Hashirama's cells integrated into his body. Haru Uchiha didn't have those cells. Yet he had wood style. Hashirama's wood style allowed for automatic healing. Chakra-based regeneration that required no hand signs. Could Haru have inherited the same trait? He didn't voice the suspicion aloud. With his Kami, he could escape at will. Denzo and the others didn't matter to him. He had already obtained what he came for. Orochimaru, watching from afar, licked his lips. His cold eyes gleamed with dark, insatiable desire. Haru's performance thrilled him. He must have that body. Go. Denzo raised his hand. The remaining root shinobi vanished and reappeared around Haru, encircling him. Haru didn't hesitate. He attacked first. The battlefield was a wasteland of craters and debris, and Haru's speed was like lightning. Ninjutsu from all directions rained down, carving the earth with explosive force. But none of them hit him. Wood style, Grafting technique. Long, sharpened wooden thorns burst from Haru's arms. As he zipped across the battlefield, he launched the thorns with precise aim. They flew at such speed that most eyes couldn't follow. One moment they were in Haru's hands, the next, they pierced flesh. The thorns impaled their targets, then, under Haru's chakra control, expanded from within, erupting outward in grotesque bursts. PFFT. Blood sprayed. One root ninja was reduced to a spiked corpse in seconds. It didn't even look like he had been stabbed. It looked as if he had grown onto the spikes. And this wasn't an isolated case. Haru used elite-level taijutsu and breakneck speed to streak through the battlefield like a ghost. Everywhere he went, screams and blood followed. Denzo's face darkened. All of these root operatives were personally selected by him. Loyal. Trained. Dead. His fists clenched in rage. The masked man's mask couldn't hide his unease. Wood style, insertion technique. That was his technique. How did Haru know it? And he used it better. Combined with such high-level physical ability, Haru's execution surpassed even his own. The scene before him stirred up memories he didn't want. Memories of another battlefield. Another massacre. Of Rin. Why aren't you helping? Denzo snapped at him. But the masked man remained impassive. Haru was Hidden Lee Village's problem, not his. He had already called Orochimaru, already set the extermination of the Uchiha clan into motion. His role was done. He had what he needed. Denzo meant nothing to him now. Chapter 33, Impure World Reincarnation. The corpses of the first and second Hokage. Seeing that the masked man gave no reply and had no intention of joining the battle, Denzo's expression darkened. He turned sharply toward Itachi and ordered coldly. Itachi, take action. Kill him. Don't forget the promise we made. Denzo reminded. Itachi hesitated for a moment, his frown deepening. He glanced at Denzo but ultimately obeyed. Just as he prepared to step forward, Orochimaru interjected with a sly smile. Give me the boy's body. I can handle it. Denzo's brows furrowed. He had known Orochimaru for many years. As a former comrade within the Hidden Leaf, their paths had crossed many times. He understood exactly what Orochimaru wanted. And more importantly, what he was capable of. But this wasn't the time to be picky. He didn't refuse. He simply nodded and said 2 words, do it. The power that Haru Uchiha had just displayed was beyond anything Denzo had anticipated. Without revealing his own trump cards, Denzo knew the elite root members alone wouldn't be able to take Haru down. External support was necessary. The masked man had clearly no interest in interfering. Itachi Uchiha had already clashed with Haru the earlier and sustained injuries. Denzo didn't trust Itachi would be able to finish the job. The only viable candidate left was Orochimaru. One of the legendary Sannin. A man who had always walked the line between genius and madness. If Orochimaru made such a bold claim, he must have a plan. Whether it would succeed or fail, that remained to be seen. Given the terrifying strength Haru had just revealed, taking him down would be no easy feat. At worst, both sides might suffer heavy losses. And what happened after that would depend on Orochimaru's true intentions. Fine. Denzo said sharply. But remember what you promised. Orochimaru let out a low chuckle, his expression unchanged. He knew Denzo too well. Even if he couldn't guess every detail of Denzo's scheming mind, he could predict the majority of it. Still, he proceeded without hesitation. Because Orochimaru had absolute faith in his own ninjutsu. When the time came, regardless of what Denzo had planned, he would be powerless to stop him. All Orochimaru wanted was Denzo's tacit approval. Nothing more. With a few slow steps forward, Orochimaru began weaving hand seals. Summoning jutsu, impure world reincarnation. Boom. From the earth, 2 coffins began to rise. They pushed through the ground slowly, emerging upright in front of the gathered onlookers. Their surfaces were etched with complex sealing scripts. Bang. The lid swung open. Inside the left coffin, a man with long black hair, wearing a tight black combat uniform reinforced with red armor plates. A distinct clan insignia rested on the armor's left shoulder. The mark of the Senju clan. Inside the right coffin, a figure with silver hair, red eyes, and 3 crimson streaks across his cheeks. He wore a head protector of polished iron and a similar black combat suit, lined with blue armor and a white fur collar trailing down his back. This is the first and second Hokage? The words erupted from the mouths of several root operatives in stunned unison. Even these hardened killers couldn't hide their disbelief. The revered leaders of Hidden Lee Village. Summoned like tools, reduced to weapons of war. Even the most truthless root members, indoctrinated to suppress emotion, couldn't ignore the weight of what they were seeing. Impure world reincarnation. The forbidden technique that resurrects the dead by binding their souls to corpses. How dare they treat our Hokage like puppets? Unforgivable. To defile the first and second Hokage like this. A wave of uneasy murmurs rippled through the gathered root shinobi. Orochimaru merely smiled, unfazed. The unrest only made things more entertaining. Denzo, however, now looked at Orochimaru with a hint of genuine fear. He had always known Orochimaru was dangerous, but this was unprecedented. To summon both the first and second Hokage? He knew exactly how terrifying their strength was. Especially the first. Senju Hashirama, the god of shinobi. If Orochimaru truly controlled such power, he could go anywhere, do anything. Why would he even bother to negotiate? But then Denzo exhaled slowly, calming his nerves. He understood. This was a bluff. If Orochimaru really had full control, he would have made his move long ago. He wouldn't waste time dealing with someone like Denzo. Having made up his mind, Denzo signaled for Root to stand down. The priority now was to capture Haru Uchiha. As for how Orochimaru did it, Denzo didn't care. Itachi Uchiha stood silently nearby. The shock faded quickly from his expression. He was curious. How powerful were these two Hokage now, compared to their prime? Forgive me, Lord First. Lord Second. Orochimaru said mockingly. He pulled two paper talismans inscribed with cursed seals and inserted them into the bodies of the Hokage. A shiver of dark delight ran through him. To command such legendary figures. It was intoxicating. As the talismans took effect, the bodies of Hashirama and Obirama began to twitch. Color returned to their flesh. The pallor of death faded. Their fingers twitched. Their heads, which had been hanging limply, slowly lifted. Their hollow eyes remained black and empty, but otherwise, they looked alive. Gasps echoed from the surrounding shinobi. It's done. Orochimaru whispered with icy satisfaction. He wove more hand seals. The first and second Hokage, who had remained motionless until now, began to move. They surged forward. Their target was Haru Uchiha. Every eye on the battlefield turned to them. They wanted to see just how far Orochimaru's impure world reincarnation had come. And how long Haru could withstand the combined might of two Hokage. Haru felt the change in the battlefield immediately. When his eyes fell on the two advancing figures, his expression tightened. He understood instantly. Impure world reincarnation. Those were the real first and second Hokage. Or at least, their bodies and battle prowess. His heart pounded. Not from fear. But from anticipation. This battle was about to escalate into something far beyond any of their original plans. Chapter 34, play it directly as a battle simulator. The root ninjas who had surrounded Haru Uchiha retreated and stood far away. The battle just now had proven that even if they attacked together, they were no match for Haru. And now, with the first and second Hokage revived through impure world reincarnation approaching, the battle had reached a level far beyond their capabilities. In a clash between Kage-level powerhouses, they were nothing more than cannon fodder. The residual shockwaves alone would be more than enough to kill them. Retreating was the most rational and wise decision. Haru didn't bother to stop their withdrawal. He remained motionless, his gaze fixed on the direction from which the first and second Hokage were approaching. Itachi Uchiha, Orochimaru, even the army of Root Ninja had failed to challenge him significantly. He needed true pressure. He needed opponents of the first and second Hokage's caliber to sharpen himself and evolve. In the silent night, under the burning sky, as his thoughts shifted, the crimson glow of Haru's Mangekyo Sharingan shimmered even more brilliantly. Simulation failed. A transparent line of text appeared in the void. It signified the failure of Haru's first simulation on the third day. Surrounded by the combined assault of the first and second Hokage, Haru ultimately fell. These two were legends across Hidden Leaf Village and even the entire shinobi world. Particularly the first Hokage, Senju Hashirama, revered as the god of shinobi, was stronger than most could even comprehend. His use of wood style was fearless. In clash after clash, Hashirama's mastery of wood style overwhelmed Haru. His battle experience and sheer strength offered Haru unexpected insight. Even Haru had to admit, wood style could be wielded in ways he hadn't imagined. And then there was the second Hokage, Senju Obirama. Though not as powerful as his older brother, Obirama was no slouch. His ninjutsu arsenal was vast and astonishing. Especially his use of the Flying Thunder God technique, which had reached unimaginable levels. Untraceable. Unpredictable. Together, their synergy formed a Kage-level combination few could hope to overcome. Haru let out a long breath, stabilizing his mindset for the next round of simulation. At the same time, he reviewed everything that had changed in the last simulation. Among those changes, the most significant was Orochimaru's arrival. Orochimaru's initial strike had been a sneak attack. Haru had only survived thanks to his Mangekyo Sharingan's Izanagi. Then came the first and second Hokage, summoned through impure world reincarnation. Of course, these weren't the Hokage in their prime. Especially Hashirama, who seemed to possess not even half his true strength. But as a time traveler, Haru understood why. The current impure world reincarnation was incomplete. It couldn't bring out the full power of the revived shinobi. It wasn't until over a decade later, during the Fourth Great Ninja War, that Kabuto perfected it by using white zetsu as sacrifice material, restoring nearly the full strength of those revived. Even so, the first and second Hokage remained formidable. Their cooperation formed an overwhelming force few could stand against. Haru possessed the Otsutsuki physique, the Mangekyo Sharingan, and wood style. At his current level, he could defeat someone like Orochimaru and even handle a combo like Orochimaru and Itachi without much pressure. But against the first and second Hokage? Still not enough. After one intense battle, he was once again defeated. Haru narrowed his eyes. He was beginning to realize something. As he grew stronger, the enemies he faced grew in both power and number. At the beginning, his enemies were mere root operatives. Then came Itachi. Now he was facing Itachi, Orochimaru, Denzo, the masked man, and a small army of root ninjas. And now even the first and second Hokage had entered the fray. If the simulation continued like this, who knew who he might have to face next? Yet, Haru felt no fear or anxiety. Instead, he felt anticipation. Excitement. Soon after, he calmed himself and initiated the next simulation. After all, his power was growing steadily. His survival time in simulations was increasing. And with each iteration, he fought stronger opponents, further honing his strength. He was evolving. But every advantage comes with drawbacks. Yes, his power was growing. But longer simulations meant fewer total simulations. And fewer simulations meant fewer chances to refresh his abilities or draw a golden ability. For Haru, strengthening himself through life and death duels was important. But gaining golden abilities, or locking in those powers, was just as important, maybe even more so. After all, there were other ways to become stronger. Fights to the death weren't limited to simulations. But golden abilities could only be gained this way. In theory, 5 simulations should yield 5 golden abilities. But reality didn't work that way. There were no guarantees. You couldn't guarantee a golden ability every day. So the safest method was to stack the numbers. Keep refreshing. It seemed inefficient. But it was the only viable path. So, for the next several simulations, Haru shifted his strategy. He abandoned his usual cautious style. Instead, he began using bold, unconventional tactics. Most of them failed spectacularly. When fighting true Kage-level combatants, the smartest move was to stay grounded, progress step by step. Rushing only revealed his weaknesses early. But the new approach wasn't completely useless. First of all, the rate of refreshing abilities noticeably increased. Second, some of those reckless strategies sparked valuable insights. Not all were a waste. And so, time passed. Haru ran simulation after simulation. Each time, experimenting with strange, unorthodox ideas. He confirmed many. But still, the golden ability he desperately sought remained elusive. Chapter 35, 80 Gods Vacuum Attack. Yui Kurenai and Yuzuki Yujao came to visit on their own initiative. The timer on the wall ticked relentlessly, its sharp rhythm gnawing at Haru Uchiha's nerves. In just over an hour, the Uchiha clan extermination night simulation system would enter its 2-day cool-down phase. Once that happened, the chance to solidify any newly gained ability would vanish. He'd seen some purple-tier abilities during this run, respectable, useful even, but not a single trace of a golden one. That made Haru grit his teeth in frustration. Would he really have to settle for a purple ability this time? If he didn't pick anything, it would mean wasting a rare opportunity to lock in a power upgrade. Purple-tier abilities weren't trash, far from it. They could significantly increase his strength. But that wasn't what Haru was after. He wanted more than power, he wanted dominance. Purple wasn't enough. Letting out a long breath, Haru forced his rising impatience down. The clock was ticking, and there wasn't much time left. He had to push harder, simulate faster. He couldn't afford to leave this run empty-handed. After all, opportunities for real-life growth through life and death combat weren't limited to simulations. But the risk in reality was higher, a single mistake could cost him everything. The simulation, on the other hand, offered 5 golden ability chances. Miss one, and it was gone forever. Driven by this urgency, Haru began simulating again. To speed up the refresh rate and increase the odds of uncovering a golden ability, Haru pulled out all the stops. In just an hour, he ran over 20 simulations. Some of the abilities that popped up were impressive: Kaguya Clan Kekkai, Earth grudge fear, powerful, to be sure. But still, no gold. He refused to give up. Then, just as the simulation window was about to close, a golden row of text finally shimmered into existence. He had done it. He hadn't given up, and it paid off. Without even clearly seeing all the options, Haru immediately selected the first one and locked it in. Only a few minutes remained before the system entered cool down. There was no time left to simulate again. Now, finally, he could take a breath and carefully examine what he had secured. 80 God's Airstrike, golden ability, a bloodline technique that maximizes chakra into countless devastating punches, creating overwhelming shockwaves with each blow. Shake the sky with divine power, an all-in-one offense and defense, a merciless divine fist. Haru's eyes gleamed with joy. The 80 God's Airstrike. Kaguya Otsutsuki's ultimate taijutsu, a bloodline move that stood at the apex of physical techniques in the Naruto world. It was similar in concept to Might Guy's Evening Elephant or Neji's Rotation, but on a vastly different scale. In the original timeline, Kaguya had used this technique to shatter Sasuke's full-body Susanoo. That kind of destructive force surpassed even Guy's Night Guy technique, which pushed his body to the brink by unlocking all 8 gates. Just like the system's description said, it was a ruthless divine strike, capable of shaking the sky. Of course, power wasn't just about technique. It depended on the user. Take the fire style, Great Fireball. If a Genin used it, it might singe a few leaves. But if someone like Madara Uchiha launched the same jutsu, it could turn entire battlefields to ash. So even though Haru had obtained the 80 God's Airstrike, it didn't mean he could wield it at Kaguya's level right away. That kind of power didn't come instantly. It had to be earned. Still, Haru wasn't the type to delude himself with fantasies of invincibility. As the ability solidified into his body, he felt a strange, pulsing discomfort. Then pain, sharp and sudden, like his muscles were tearing apart and refridging themselves. Eventually, the pain faded, replaced by a surge of strength coursing through his limbs. He opened his eyes and exhaled deeply. He'd done it. He'd made the deadline. And now, he could feel it, the immense power of the 80 God's Airstrike swirling inside him like a slumbering storm. If the root came after him again, it wouldn't be like last time. He wouldn't waste time dodging and countering. One airstrike, and anyone who got close would be obliterated. Even the likes of Itachi, Orochimaru, and Denzo would have to think twice before stepping up. And as for the first and second Hokage revived through impure world reincarnation, they weren't at full power. Not even close. With his new strength, Haru was confident. He could take them. Suddenly, his expression shifted. His Mangekyo Sharingan flickered, and his gaze snapped to the door. Someone was coming. 2 people. They were trying to hide their chakra. Not Root, not Akatsuki. And there was no hostility. Still, Haru was puzzled. He lived far from the village center, in isolation. He rarely socialized. He didn't have friends. Who would bother visiting him? Knock, knock. As expected, a knock sounded on the door a few seconds later. A gentle voice followed. Haru Uchiha-kun, are you there? A girl's voice. Clear, pleasant. Yui Kurenai. What the hell was she doing here? With a flicker of chakra, Haru used the teleportation jutsu and appeared at the door. When he opened it, 2 women stood there. The one on the left had wavy hair, wide brown eyes, and a subtle charm hidden beneath her modest appearance. The one on the right had long lavender hair, a sword strapped to her back, and a cool, detached expression. Yui Kurenai and Yuzuki Yujou. He'd worked with them on a previous mission, one of the few where he hadn't operated solo. Haru. Kurenai stammered. Clearly, his sudden appearance had startled them. Both women looked a bit flustered, their hands twitching nervously at their sides. They lowered their gazes slightly, whatever words they'd prepared vanishing into awkward silence. It had only been a few days since their last mission together. But something was different now. They both felt it. It wasn't his appearance that hadn't changed. It was his presence. His aura. Before, he'd been quiet and efficient, the cold kind of capable. But now, it was like standing next to a thunderstorm barely contained inside a human shell. Every slight movement carried weight. Every flicker in his eyes promised danger. Even the casual glance he gave them made their hearts skip a beat. It was intimidating. It was intoxicating. They were both skilled kunoichi. Their ages weren't too far apart. But standing before Haru Uchiha now, they felt like children in the presence of something ancient and immense. And that face, those flawless, almost divine features. Looking at him too long was like staring into the sun. They couldn't help it. They were mesmerized. Chapter 36, Young Hinata. A soft and cute girl. You. What's the matter? Haru Uchiha waited a while, But when neither Yui Kurenai nor Yuzuki Yujao said anything, he took the initiative to break the silence. The two women, their minds momentarily blank, snapped out of it at his words and quickly remembered the reason they had come. Kurenai spoke first. It's like this. We just received a mission, but one of our teammates is still recovering from an injury. So, we'd like to ask if you could join us, Haru-kun. At the Hidden Leaf Village Military Police Force, clan head Fugaku has already approved it. Finally, Yuzuki Yujao added softly. So, will you? Since the security division had already arranged the transfer, Haru Uchiha had no reason to refuse. He agreed readily and without hesitation. Afterward, Kurenai and Yujao gave Haru a brief rundown of the mission as the three of them began walking toward the rendezvous point. It was just a standard C-rank mission. One that didn't even require them to leave the village. Simple, but tedious. It required extra manpower, which explained why Haru had been asked to join. In addition to Haru, Kurenai, and Yujao, another team would be working the mission alongside them, Gekko Hayate, Saratobi Asuma, and Might Guy. The Uchiha district was located at the edge of Hidden Leaf Village, so after leaving the compound, they walked a short distance before finally arriving at the heart of the village. But the moment they stepped into the busier streets of Hidden Leaf Village, Haru immediately noticed something strange. People standing at a distance would whisper as they passed. Yet the moment he got close, conversations would abruptly end, and every gaze sharpened with suspicion and wariness. Haru didn't need to ask what was going on. Of the three of them, both Kurenai and Yujao were born and raised within Hidden Leaf Village's inner districts. The villagers had no issue with them. No, this atmosphere was clearly aimed at him. Or more accurately, at the Uchiha clan. The tension between the village leadership and the Uchiha had clearly spread to even the most ordinary civilians. Even common villagers now carried a deep-seated hostility. Still, Haru's expression remained unreadable. Calm and indifferent from start to finish. He didn't have a fragile heart. What these people whispered, what they thought, none of it mattered to him. It wasn't even worth acknowledging. But for Yujao and Kurenai, the walk had grown visibly uncomfortable. They had asked Haru to help, not expecting the journey itself to become so strained. The conflict between the Uchiha and Hidden Leaf Village was no secret, especially not to seasoned kunoichi like them. Even so, both women had always hated fighting. Peace was what they truly hoped for. In their hearts, they wished the Uchiha clan and Hidden Leaf Village could coexist in harmony. But they were only chunin. Low-ranking in the grand scheme. There was nothing they could do to change the tide of this growing rift. As the uneasy silence around them thickened, both women subconsciously glanced toward Haru, worried that he might be offended by the cold stares and whispers. But when they saw his face, still calm, still carrying that distant handsomeness without even a flicker of emotion, they quietly sighed in relief. The three quickened their pace. No one wanted to linger under the weight of such heavy eyes. And just then, a soft voice called out from nearby, tinged with surprise and shyness. "Be brother Haru." The three turned around in unison. The voice was small, innocent, and sweet. Like the chime of a bell. And although not loud, it carried clearly through the quiet street. A little girl was waving at them. She looked to be around 6 or 7 years old. Short, dark blue hair framed her porcelain face, which was so delicate it almost seemed carved from fine china. She was undeniably adorable. But the most distinctive feature? Her pale, opalescent eyes. Byakugan. She was of the Hyuga clan. And not just any Hyuga. This girl was Hinata Hyuga, the eldest daughter of the clan leader. Hinata. Yujao and Kurenai both smiled warmly and waved back. They clearly liked the shy, soft-spoken child. Even Haru's usually aloof expression softened as he looked at her. In his previous life, Haru had always had a favorable impression of Hinata. Now, after traveling through time and sharing several small interactions with her, that impression had only deepened. Of course, it wasn't romantic. She was just a child. Barely 7 years old. This warmth was something different. A simple affection, almost protective. Little Hinata looked at them with her jewel-like eyes, then quickly lowered her head, her cheeks tinged pink. She had suddenly become shy. Miss Hinata." A voice interrupted them. A middle-aged man, dressed like a well-trained servant, hurried over. His expression tensed the moment he noticed Haru standing nearby. His demeanor changed instantly. Panic and caution flashing in his eyes. He grabbed Hinata's hand and immediately pulled her away, speaking hurriedly in a low voice by her ear. The girl looked confused and tried to resist, turning her head back toward Haru's group, but she was too small, too weak to break free. She was swiftly taken away. The whole scene played out in a matter of seconds. Kurenai and Yujao were both caught off guard. They didn't understand why Hinata had suddenly been dragged off so urgently. But Haru had already seen through it. This was about his identity. About the Uchiha. Hinata was still a child. She might not fully understand the political tension surrounding her. But her caretaker certainly did. Anyone chosen to watch over Hinata, the Hyuga heir, was no ordinary servant. Maybe not strong in combat, but wise and discerning enough to see the implications of such a meeting. Hinata, a Hyuga noble, standing publicly and affectionately greeting an Uchiha. In today's political climate, such a scene could be spun dangerously. The third Hokage might overlook it. But Denzo wouldn't. A single rumor could lead to scandal, disgrace, even punishment. And so, the servant had acted immediately, shielding his charge from potential backlash. It was the most logical move. Hinata's identity was too important to risk. As the next in line to lead the Hyuga clan, any association with the Uchiha, especially during this period of tension, was taboo. "Let's go," Haru said quietly. His voice was low and indifferent. He turned and walked away. "Ah. Right." Kurenai and Yujao quickly followed. Neither brought up what had just happened. There was nothing more to say. The three continued walking, the weight of recent events still lingering silently between them. But they said nothing. And for a time, silence was enough. Chapter 37, Hayate and Asuma. For some reason, I feel like there's something green on my head. When Haru Uchiha, Yui Kurenai, and Yuzuki Yujao arrived at the designated meeting point, Sarutobi Asuma, Gecko Hayate, and Might Guy were already waiting there. Seeing Haru approach with the others, Might Guy immediately dashed over, his energy uncontainable. "Haru, I heard you defeated Kurasuke Riga, one of the 7 ninja swordsmen. That's incredible." As he spoke, Guy threw an arm forward to wrap around Haru's shoulder in an overly familiar gesture. Haru's brow twitched slightly, and he instinctively stepped back, deftly avoiding the contact. Of course, he understood that Guy meant no harm. But, although they had graduated from the academy together, they weren't exactly close. Guy's exuberance was a bit too much to handle. Might Guy's extended arm hung awkwardly in the air for a moment before he let out a hearty laugh. "Ha ha 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 ha. Haru, how about a taijutsu match? Let's test our strength." He gave a dramatic thumbs up, flashing his trademark gleaming white teeth. Haru's lips twitched in annoyance. Beside him, Yujao, Kurenai, Asuma, and Hayate all tried to suppress their laughter. Their faces twitched involuntarily. Might Guy was as thick-skinned and relentless as ever. "Guy, enough," Kurenai said firmly. "We still have a mission to complete. We can't afford to waste time with your duels." Yuzuki Yujao added. "Besides, Haru's only here because we asked him for help." Might Guy looked momentarily disappointed, but quickly recovered with a big grin. "All right then. After the mission, we'll definitely have that match. Haru, you must promise not to back out." "Fine," Haru replied. He wasn't close to Guy, but he respected him deeply. Might Guy had no famous bloodline. He didn't inherit any Kekkei Genkai or possess legendary talent. He was just an ordinary boy born in the Hidden Leaf. And there were many like him in the village. Some gave up becoming shinobi altogether. Others became mediocre chunin and lived quiet, unremarkable lives. But Might Guy was different. He wasn't blessed by fate. He had no prestigious lineage to rely on. What he had was willpower. Endless, undying perseverance. No matter how impossible something seemed, Guy would throw his whole being into it. Even when hard work didn't yield immediate results, he never lost faith. If effort didn't lead to success, then he simply pushed harder. Again. And again. As long as you gave it your all, eventually, the results would come. That was Might Guy's creed. And under that conviction, he rose from being an average nobody to a force recognized among his generation. Even more than 10 years later, during the Fourth Great Ninja War, this same man, once so average that few noticed him, would erupt with a strength so fearsome, it would earn the awe of even Madara Uchiha himself. How could anyone not respect a man like that? And for Haru, now possessing an Otsutsuki physique and far more power than before, this was the perfect chance to experience combat with a true taijutsu master. "Well then, let's have a real fight after this," Guy repeated, thumbs up, teeth gleaming like a beacon. At that moment, Asuma and Hayate joined the group. The 6 of them gathered to finalize their strategy for the mission. With Haru's help, this should be smooth sailing, Kurenai said, giving Haru a grateful smile. Yujao nodded in agreement. This mission wasn't particularly dangerous, but it was tedious. Something that would typically never be assigned to a shinobi of Haru's level. But with one of their teammates still recovering from injury, they'd pulled some strings to get Haru's help. Both women were sincerely thankful. "What's so great about that?" Hayate suddenly muttered, sounding a little sour. Yujao was usually composed and rarely smiled. But today, her demeanor was different. She had smiled. A rare, breathtaking smile. It was the kind of smile that resembled the first thaw of spring, like dew glistening on fresh blossoms. But tragically, that smile wasn't meant for Hayate. It was for someone else. "We've got more than one Jonin here," Hayate tatted. "Asuma and Guy were both promoted this year." At that, Guy struck another enthusiastic pose, flashing his blinding teeth once more. Asuma, meanwhile, straightened up, puffed out his chest, and declared in a deep voice, "With me here, there won't be any problems." But when he turned to glance at Kurenai, his expression faltered. She wasn't even looking at him. Her gaze remained fixed on Haru Uchiha. A flame of irritation flickered in Asuma's chest. Still, Kurenai was right there beside him. He couldn't afford to lose composure in front of her. And to be fair, Haru had defeated Kurasuke Riga, one of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist. Even if Asuma doubted the exact details, the outcome itself couldn't be denied. Haru Uchiha's name was already making waves in the village. Asuma wasn't confident he could beat him. So he held back. A confrontation now could end in a loss. Public and humiliating. No, better to prove his worth on the mission. He would perform exceptionally and show Kurenai that he wasn't inferior to Haru. Kurenai, meanwhile, let out a quiet sigh in her heart. She had known for a long time how Asuma felt about her. She had simply pretended not to notice. He wasn't a bad man. Plain in looks, addicted to cigarettes, carrying a handful of minor vices. But not bad. He had status. The son of the 3rd Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen. He had talent. Among the top of the younger Jonin. It would be hard for any woman to ignore someone like him. And for a while, Kurenai had been tempted. But ever since their last mission with Haru, she didn't know why, but the memory of Haru's calm, unfazed expression as he faced Kurasuke Riga lingered in her thoughts. And the words he had spoken that day. Simple, steady, filled with conviction, "Don't be afraid. I'm here." Whenever she thought about it, her heart felt warm. And at the same time, more distant from Asuma. Asuma wasn't a bad man. He just wasn't the one she wanted. She only hoped Asuma would soon realize that, and stop wasting his time and emotions on her. The same held true for Yuzuki Yujao. If Haru hadn't been around, maybe Hayate might have had a chance. But now, everything was different. Chapter 38, Maybe this is what it means to be a dog licker. Haru Uchiha, Yui Kurenai, Yuzuki Yujao, Sarutobi Asuma, Might Guy, and Hayate gathered together, quickly assigned their missions, and set off to carry them out. For some strange reason, both Asuma and Hayate seemed especially energized and eager, displaying an unusual level of drive and initiative. They even went so far as to take on extra tasks from the others. Seeing this, Might Guy's eyes sparkled with admiration. This is youth. Youth should be about pushing your limits and fighting with all your strength. He shouted, before eagerly joining Asuma and Hayate. Yui Kurenai and Yuzuki Yujao were both stunned by the sudden shift. What's gotten into them today? Did they take the wrong medicine? Might Guy was easier to understand. Someone like him defied normal logic anyway. Those who understood, understood. But Asuma and Hayate? Why were they fighting over such grueling work? Still, Haru Uchiha didn't mind at all. He took his time with the tasks, neither rushing nor slacking off. If others were willing to do the work for him without asking anything in return, why not let them? Free labor was always welcome. He wouldn't mind having a few more like them around. Night. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silvery white glow over the land. Everything it touched seemed cloaked in a soft veil of light, transformed into pale shades like reflections on still spring water. Little Hinata lay in a rocking chair in the courtyard, gazing up at the deepening azure of the night sky. Her thoughts, however, remained on the day's events. On the way home, the housekeeper had said a great deal to her. Then, after returning, her father also spoke at length. She understood some of it. But not all. They were all people of Hidden Leaf Village, so why did it feel like they were so distant from each other? And would she really never get to see her brother Haru again? Never speak to him again? In front of Hinata's large, bright Byakugan eyes, the stars began to blur, and a different memory flickered to life. It was a snowy afternoon. A little girl, no older than 3 or 4, walked alone down a secluded path. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, and her hands and feet numb. Looking closely, one could see that this girl resembled a younger Hinata. The wind howled, kicking up snow from the trees and ground, making the cold even sharper. Little Hinata pulled her coat tightly around herself and pressed forward. But she didn't get far. A group of older boys blocked her path. "Stop right there. Hand over all your money, or you're not getting past." I don't have any money." Hinata's voice trembled as she instinctively backed away. "No money?" The leader scoffed. "Then let's find out for sure." With a wave of his hand, the other boys surrounded her. "No. I really don't." Tears welled up in her eyes as she shook from fear, stepping back further, until she tripped on a stone buried beneath the snow and fell. The boys closed in, ready to strike. Hinata curled into herself, head buried in her knees, ready to endure the pain. But the blows never came. Instead, a calm, gentle voice reached her ears. "It's okay. You can get up now." Hinata looked up. The boys had vanished. In their place stood a tall, handsome boy, hand extended toward her. Even as a child, she only had one thought. How could anyone be so good-looking? That boy, of course, was Haru Uchiha. He helped her to her feet, brushed off the snow, and walked her home. The final image in Hinata's memory was of a boy leading a little girl through a world of soft pinks and whites, their forms growing smaller in the distance. Behind them, 2 sets of shallow footprints were left in the snow. The marks of a shared memory. "Brother Haru," Hinata murmured, a soft smile forming at the corners of her lips. Just then, a shadow flashed before her eyes. The world turned black, and she collapsed into unconsciousness. Elsewhere, after several hours of intense labor, Haru Uchiha and the others finally completed their mission. They were utterly exhausted. Especially Azuma and Hayate, who had pushed themselves the hardest. Both were staggering, barely able to walk. Even Might Guy, known for his stamina, was only slightly better off. Their earlier plans for a sparring match? Completely forgotten. They didn't even have the strength to mention it. Yui Kurenai and Yuzuki Yuja were also feeling drained. Even though they had taken on the lightest workload, they were still women. Physically weaker by comparison. And neither specialized in taijutsu. Their fatigue was understandable. Haru Uchiha, however, looked untouched by exhaustion. With the blood of the Otsutsuki running through his veins, this level of effort meant nothing to him. The 6 of them walked the darkened path back home, shadows cast by the moon trailing behind. Suddenly, Haru halted. Something felt off. Turning his head sharply, he caught sight of a figure dashing through the treetops in the distance, illuminated briefly by the moonlight. The figure was carrying something. And definitely wasn't from Hidden Leaf Village. But Haru didn't call out. He didn't react much at all. To him, Hidden Leaf Village was not an ally. Not anymore. Not after everything between them and the Uchiha clan. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So why should he intervene? But then, he froze again. His senses picked up a familiar chakra signature. Hinata. The figure was carrying Hinata. If it had been anyone else, he would have turned a blind eye. But Hinata was different. He wouldn't, and couldn't, ignore this. Seeing him stop so suddenly, Yui Kurenai frowned. What's wrong? Everyone else turned toward him as well. Haru narrowed his eyes toward the darkness ahead. Someone just infiltrated. That way. He said quietly. Infiltrated? The word immediately shifted the mood. A possible breach was no small matter. It had to be reported. Might Guy rushed to Haru's side, mimicking his stance and peering into the distance. But all he saw was moonlight and shadows. Hey! What for an infiltration? Asuma scoffed. Impossible. Though his heart had skipped a beat when Haru first said it, Asuma quickly recovered. It didn't make sense. As the son of the 3rd Hokage, Sarutobi Azuma's knowledge surpassed that of most ninjas. He had the experience and context to analyze such a situation rationally. A full-blown infiltration into Hidden Leaf Village? Unlikely. Or so he thought. Chapter 39, Hinata is kidnapped. Trouble in the Hidden Cloud Village. Our Hidden Leaf Village may not appear heavily guarded on the surface. Sarutobi Azuma began, his voice calm yet firm. But that's just a deception. In reality, every key entrance and exit is closely monitored by the Anbu. It's not just anyone who can walk in. He glanced around at the group with a confident smirk. I'm sure you're all familiar with the Anbu. Now think, who could possibly sneak past them? Asuma leaned in slightly, his expression growing more smug. What most of you don't know, he continued, chuckling, is that the Hidden Leaf Village has long been protected by an invisible barrier. This barrier is transparent and undetectable to the naked eye. We don't notice it during day-to-day life. But as long as you're a resident of the village, it won't react to your presence. However, he added, his tone darkening, if a foreigner attempts to enter, it triggers a silent alarm. The Hokage and the Anbu are alerted instantly. And they strike back without hesitation. How could an intruder possibly bypass that? He laughed again, this time with a touch of ridicule in his gaze as it fell on Haru Uchiha. Finally caught you in a lie, kid. Gecko clapped his hands with a smirk. As expected of the Hokage's son. You really know your stuff. If it weren't for you, we'd all be fooled. Might Guy, Yuzuki Yuja, and Yui Kurenai looked uncertain, glancing toward Haru. But Haru didn't waste time arguing. Hinata was in danger. If he stayed to explain, She might already be lost beyond Hidden Leaf Village's borders. In a blur, he vanished with a teleportation jutsu. "Wait for me!" Might Guy yelled, immediately following. For reasons he couldn't quite explain, he trusted Haru more than Azuma. Yuzuki Yujao and Yui Kurenai exchanged glances. "We're going to," Kurenai said. "If it turns out to be nothing, fine. But if something's wrong, we're back up." The two Kunoichi took off after them. Sarutobi, Azuma and Hayate Gecko had no choice but to give chase as well. Beneath the pale moonlight, 6 figures raced through the trees. At the front was Haru Uchiha, moving like a shadow. Close behind him was Might Guy, with Kurenai, Yujao, Azuma, and Hayate further back. At first, they all kept pace reasonably well. But gradually, only Might Guy could still follow Haru's trail. And even he was falling behind. No matter how hard Guy pushed himself, the gap kept growing. Eventually, Haru was gone from view. Unbelievable. Might Guy was no slouch. His taijutsu rivaled even Kakashi Hatake's. And yet, he'd been left in the dust. Azuma and Hayate were equally stunned. They knew better than anyone how strong Guy was. And now they saw with their own eyes. Haru Uchiha had surpassed that level. Meanwhile, Haru used the teleportation jutsu at full capacity, rapidly gaining on the fleeing figure. The intruder was masked and cloaked in black, cradling Hinata in his arms. The moment he sensed pursuit, the enemy didn't hesitate. Lightning style, thunderball. A sphere crackling with electric energy roared through the air, speeding straight toward Haru. Lightning is the fastest of the natural elements, difficult to see, impossible to dodge at close range. Boom. The sphere struck Haru dead on, erupting in a blinding explosion. A crater formed at the impact site, smoke and dust billowing into the sky. "Humphrey. Fool." The masked man sneered and turned to flee again. The blast had made quite a noise. Someone would be coming. He needed to get out fast. Just as he was about to move, his body froze. He couldn't move. Every limb locked up. He looked down, heart sinking. Chains of chakra were wrapped around his body, binding him tightly to a nearby tree. Before him stood Haru Uchiha, completely unscathed. "Impossible." The man gasped. "That attack hit you." His eyes widened in horror. "It was a Genjutsu. I've trapped him in it since the beginning." Haru's face was unreadable. This wasn't the victory to celebrate. The enemy wasn't even worth the effort. Based on Hidden Leaf Village's power scale, this intruder was only Elite Jonin level. Haru hadn't even needed to use a single trump card. He calmly stepped forward and pulled off the intruder's mask. The man's face was unfamiliar. But the forehead protector told Haru everything he needed to know, the symbol of the Hidden Cloud Village. "You're a diplomat from the Hidden Cloud?" Haru asked coldly. The man sneered back. "Now that you know, let me go. Do you want to start a war between our nations?" Even in defeat, the Cloud Envoy was arrogant and defiant. Haru didn't answer. But in his mind, memories stirred. In the original timeline, there had been a similar incident. Hinata was kidnapped by a Cloud diplomat. Hayashi Hyuga, her father, killed the abductor. In retaliation, the Hidden Cloud demanded Hayashi's corpse, claiming the diplomat had been murdered unlawfully. They wanted the Byakugan. To avoid war, Hidden Leaf Village offered up Hyuga Hayashi, Hayashi's twin brother, as a scapegoat. How pathetic. The third Hokage had bent over backwards to avoid conflict, even sacrificing one of their own. The Cloud dared demand justice after attempting to kidnap a child. Peace achieved through groveling is not peace at all. Looking at the defiant envoy now, Haru felt only contempt. The so-called risk of war didn't faze him in the slightest. In fact, wouldn't killing him make things interesting? The smile that spread across Haru's face sent a chill down the man's spine. His confidence shattered. The killing intent he felt wasn't a bluff. It was pure, cold, and real. You don't. You can't kill me." The envoy stammered, finally panicked. "I'm a diplomat. You'll bring war upon yourself." His eyes darted around desperately. But Haru didn't hesitate. Thump. A kunai flew from his hand like a whisper in the night. Squelch. It sank deep into the envoy's throat. Blood sprayed from the wound. He gagged and choked, blood foaming at his lips. His mouth moved, trying to speak. But no sound came out. Moments later, his head slumped forward. He was dead. Haru calmly stepped forward, plucked Hinata from the ground, and carried her gently in his arms. As the others closed in from the distance, he stood still beneath the moonlight, surrounded by silence, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the drip of blood. The Hidden Cloud's game had ended before it even began. And the cost would be steep. Chapter 40, Rescue Hinata. Preparations for the Night of Extermination. Haru Uchiha had easily eliminated the Hidden Cloud Village envoy and rescued Hinata. The first thing he did was examine Hinata's condition. His eyes scanned her from head to toe, checking for injuries. Fortunately, nothing was seriously wrong. Haru. Brother Haru. Am I dreaming? Hinata's soft voice trembled as she barely opened her eyes. Her words were faint, disoriented. But before she could fully awaken, her body gave out and she fainted again. Moments later, Asuma, I-8 Gecko, Might Guy, Yuzuki Yujao, and Yui Kurenai eyed at the scene. As they came upon the bloody spectacle, their expressions darkened immediately. Is that Hinata? Yui Kurenai asked, her voice tight with concern. Is she alright? Yuzuki Yujao added, rushing forward. She's fine. Haru answered calmly. Just unconscious. No major injuries. The tension eased slightly at his words, though the unease remained. Their attention then shifted to the corpse lying in a pool of blood. Who was he? Asked Might Guy. For once, his usual bright energy was replaced by a grim seriousness. Haru motioned to the enemy's forehead protector. He is from the hidden Cloud Village. Cloud Village? Asuma's brow furrowed. I just heard from my father this morning that an envoy from the hidden cloud was visiting the Hyuga clan. His voice trailed off. Could it have been him? He muttered, his mind racing. But why? Why kidnap Hinata? None of them had an answer. The theory didn't make sense at first glance. I-8, Kurenai, and Yujao were equally baffled. Might Guy didn't say anything, but the confusion was clear on his face. Then Yui Kurenai turned to Haru. What do you think, Haru? All eyes shifted to him. Even Asuma and I-8, who usually held a measure of suspicion toward Haru, listened intently. They might clash over petty matters, but when it came to life and death issues, they stood as comrades. That was the Hidden Leaf's way. No matter their disagreements, they knew when to unite. Haru didn't answer directly. Instead, he posed a question. What is the Hyuga clan most known for? The Byakugan. Asuma replied automatically. His expression darkened as realization struck. The others caught on just as quickly. Hinata's abduction wasn't random. It had everything to do with the Byakugan. The Hyuga clan's powerful jujutsu. They fell silent. The gravity of the situation settled over them like a heavy fog. This is serious. Asuma finally said. We need to inform the third Hokage immediately. Let him decide how to handle it. Killing an envoy from the hidden Cloud Village could spark a war. This was no longer a matter that a few Jonin and Chunin could resolve. Only the Hokage could shoulder the responsibility. No one objected. Asuma, being the third Hokage's son, left immediately to report what had happened. The rest stayed behind to guard the scene. And the corpse. I-8 and Might Guy stood watch, vigilant against any more attacks. Yui Kurenai and Yuzuki Yujao turned their attention to Hinata, carefully tending to her. Haru remained apart, standing silently atop a tree branch. His eyes stared into the distant dark. He was thinking. According to the original timeline, Hinata's kidnapping by the Cloud Envoy hadn't occurred the night before the Uchiha massacre. And it certainly hadn't been him who intervened. It had been Hyuga Hisashi, Hinata's uncle, who stopped the abduction. He had only just returned from a mission, and yet here he was. Things are changing. Ever since he arrived in this world, the sequence of events had begun to shift. Hinata's kidnapping tonight, Orochimaru appearing on the night of the Uchiha massacre, the resurrection of the first and second Hokage. None of it was supposed to happen this way. It was a warning. He couldn't cling to the assumptions of his past knowledge. He had to think for himself, remain cautious, stay flexible. Only that would ensure survival. And victory. But what Haru didn't realize was that even now, in the depths of the forest ahead, a dark vortex had silently opened. Two figures hidden in the shadows were pulled into it. In the blink of an eye, they emerged atop the Hokage monument. Orochimaru stood there, eyes gleaming with shock and hunger. So, we were discovered? Such terrifying perception, from such a distance. His voice was hushed, but the excitement in it was clear. Is this the power of the Sharingan? What terrifying insight! Beside him, a masked man stood tall and silent. Obito Uchiha. Though masked and composed on the outside, was anything but calm inside. He had followed the Cloud Envoy from the start, hidden in Kamui's dimension, observing from afar. With his Kage-level power and space-time ninjutsu, he had no fear of being discovered. When Haru appeared, Obito had withdrawn further to avoid being seen. But now, he had still been noticed? Is that really the perceptive range of a 3-Tomoe Sharingan? Impossible. Orochimaru's voice cut into his thoughts, laced with curiosity and glee. I wonder just how far the Mangekyo Sharingan's perception can reach. He mused aloud. As one of Hidden Leaf Village's most twisted scientists, Orochimaru had studied the Sharingan in great detail. The 3-Tomoe Sharingan boasted 3 core abilities: insight, replication, and illusion. But how powerful those abilities became depended entirely on the user. A stronger user meant stronger jutsu, better perception, more precise kanjutsu. But even those strengths had limits. And the leap from 3 Tomoe to Mangekyo was not just one of degree. It was one of kind. A true evolution. If Haru's 3 Tomoe Sharingan already possessed such terrifying perception, then Orochimaru fell silent, the implications clear. Obito, too, said nothing. His masked face remained stoic, but inside, a storm raged. He can't just have the 3 Tomoe. Even with the Mangekyo Sharingan, Obito himself couldn't reach that level of sensory precision. Could it be? Has Haru Uchiha already awakened the Mangekyo? If so, the implications were grave. Unreal physical prowess combined with Mangekyo-level Genjutsu and insight. Haru's power far surpassed what Obito had anticipated. But he had a plan. One that he'd put in motion well before tonight. One that involved the man standing beside him. I trust your preparations are complete? Obito asked. Orochimaru smiled, his lips curling into a serpent's grin. Of course. There won't be any mistakes. His tone was confident. Arrogant, even. He trusted in his own forbidden ninjutsu. Good. Obito said with a nod. He turned his gaze to the horizon, eyes burning with resolve behind the mask. The night of extermination was coming. He would ensure it went off without a hitch. Chapter 41, Denzo's Coercion. The third Hokage's choice. Night had settled over the Hidden Leaf Village, cloaking the world in heavy darkness. Most shinobi had completed their daily missions and returned to their homes to rest, spending time with loved ones or simply enjoying a moment of peace. But within the Hokage's office, the lights still burned brightly. Sarutobi Hiruzen, the third Hokage, sat at his desk with pen in hand, tirelessly correcting documents. Before him lay a daunting stack of papers, all awaiting his signature or review. He was the longest-serving Hokage in the village's history. Upholding the legacy of both the first and second Hokage, he had ushered Hidden Leaf Village into an era of prosperity. Known for refining and promoting the will of fire, Sarutobi was admired for his unwavering diligence and sense of duty. Third Hokage. Came a sudden voice in the quiet room. A shadow stepped out from the darkness. Bandages wrapped around his head, covering even his left eye. The single visible eye gleamed with hostility and cold ambition. It was Denzo Shimura. It's time. All preparations are complete. The final decision is yours. Sarutobi paused, the pen stilling in his hand. His brow furrowed slightly, but he said nothing. He resumed writing. Denzo stepped forward. A few days ago, Fugaku Uchiha summoned the core elite of the Uchiha clan to the Hidden Leaf Village military police headquarters. They discussed rebellion. An insurrection against the village. They even drafted specific plans. This information came directly from the Anbu. There's no doubt about its authenticity. Are we really going to wait until they're fully mobilized before we act? Wait until they drive us to the brink of civil war? Denzo's tone was calm, measured. But beneath it lay a deep, relentless urgency. Over the years, he had came to understand Sarutobi well. The third would never openly condone assassination, but silence could serve the same purpose. Denzo had taken action in the shadows for years. Always with the unspoken approval of his old friend. Tonight, he was here to draw out that unspoken agreement, to make it official. To the outside world, Hidden Leaf Village appears strong and stable. But in truth, we're hollowing out. The old are aging, and the young have yet to mature. The fourth Hokage died in battle. Of the legendary Sannin, Orochimaru has defected, while Jiraiya and Tsunade wander the world, absent from their duties. You and I, two relics of the past, are left to prop up this village. You know the strength of the Uchiha. Their cursed Sharingan gives them overwhelming advantage in combat. Fugaku himself is still in his prime, and his strength is immeasurable. If they rise, can we truly stop them? And even if we win, at what cost? The other great villages are watching us. They'll strike the moment we show weakness. One misstep, and Hidden Leaf Village will fall into chaos. Denzo stepped closer. It's time, Hiruzen. The village cannot afford your hesitation any longer. Sarutobi suddenly slammed his hand down on the table. Enough. His voice was cold and firm. Head bowed, his face was hidden in shadow. But his hands trembled slightly, betraying the storm within. Denzo didn't flinch. His tone remained as composed as ever. I've already made all the arrangements. He said coolly. When the time comes, I'll act. For the good of Hidden Leaf Village, no one, not even you, can stand in my way. Crack. The pen in Sarutobi's hand snapped in two. He raised his head, eyes no longer kind and aged, but piercing with rare fury. Denzo, he said, voice low and sharp. Don't overstep your bounds. But Denzo remained calm, the corners of his lips curling into a thin smile. A silent standoff stretched between them. Old comrades now standing on opposite ends of an unseen battlefield. Knock knock. A hurried knock broke the silence. Without waiting for permission, the door burst open. It was Asuma Sarutobi, panting, his face pale with urgency. The moment he entered, Denzo vanished into the shadows without a word. "What's going on?" the third Hokage asked, his voice tinged with irritation. "Why are you panicking like this?" He had hoped to groom Asuma as his successor, but the boy's lack of discipline continued to disappoint him. Still breathless, Asuma wasted no time. "Something terrible has happened. The envoy from the Hidden Cloud Village is dead." "What?" Sarutobi's eyes narrowed. "How did this happen?" Asuma quickly recounted the events, the attempted abduction of Hinata Hyuga, the intervention by Haru Uchiha, and the killing of the envoy. Sarutobi closed his eyes, expression darkening. So, the envoy tried to steal the Byakugan. That alone was a grave offense. But the fact remained, a foreign envoy had been killed within Hidden Leaf Village's borders. That was an insult not just to one man, but to the entire Cloud Village. The history between Hidden Leaf Village and Hidden Cloud's Village had always been tense. And with the Raikage's notoriously hot-headed temperament, this could very well spiral into a full-scale war. "We're going to the scene," the third Hokage ordered at once. Asuma hesitated, worried. Is it really that serious?" "Yes," Sarutobi replied coldly. "You may think the envoy got what he deserved, but you underestimate what this represents. The envoy is the face of a nation. Killing him is equivalent to spitting in the face of the Cloud Village itself." Asuma frowned. "But if we had captured him alive, couldn't we have used that to pressure them for compensation?" "You're thinking too simply," Sarutobi said sternly. "He is already dead. The situation has completely changed. Killing an envoy. That's an international incident. Don't be naive." Asuma's expression turned grim. He had considered the possibility, but hearing it confirmed by his father made the gravity of the situation fully sink in. "It's really that serious," he muttered. Sarutobi looked at him meaningfully. Whether something becomes serious doesn't always depend on the act itself. Asuma stared at his father, clearly confused. The third Hokage sighed inwardly. His son was still far from ready. Not like Kakashi Hatake, a prodigy from a young age, or Might Guy, who trained harder than anyone. But it wasn't just strength that a Hokage needed. A Hokage had to understand people, politics, and timing. They had to balance power with diplomacy, emotions with duty. These were qualities Asuma had yet to develop. Still, Sarutobi hadn't given up on him. There was time. He patted Asuma's shoulder. "You'll understand soon enough. Now come. We need to go." Without another word, the third Hokage disappeared with the teleportation jutsu. Asuma gritted his teeth and followed, his mind racing. Tonight would change everything. Chapter 42, Everyone is Acting. The third Hokage and Asuma arrived at the scene of the incident swiftly. Several Anbu operatives followed closely, as was customary whenever the Hokage moved. Upon his arrival, Kurenai Yui, Yuzuki Yujao, Might Guy, and Hayate Gecko quickly approached. Haru Uchiha, as always, stood alone off to the side. He didn't join the others, simply giving a slight nod when the third Hokage looked in his direction. Once on site, the third Hokage immediately began questioning those present about what had happened. What they said aligned with Asuma's report. No major discrepancies. But from their testimonies, the third Hokage detected something significant. From beginning to end, there was only one person who had truly been involved in the confrontation, Haru Uchiha. The rest had simply arrived in time to witness the aftermath. What had happened in between? How exactly the envoy from Hidden Cloud's village had died at Haru's hands was a mystery to them all. The third Hokage approached Haru, his expression gentle, as always. "Haru, this time you've done us a great service. If it weren't for you, Hinata may have been taken, and we wouldn't even know it. I'll speak with clan head Fugaku personally and see that you're well rewarded." "Thank you, Lord Third," Haru said, feigning mild surprise, though inside he remained utterly composed. Reward? What a joke. In the end, the Uchiha clan would be wiped out. What use was a reward now? The third Hokage paused and then continued. "Asuma mentioned it was you who realized Hinata had been kidnapped, then pursued the Hidden Cloud's village ninja. Can you tell me in detail what happened in between?" Haru's mind sharpened instantly. Suspicious already? He really lived up to his title. This was Sarutobi Hiruzen, the professor. But Haru gave no sign of unease. He simply said flatly. "After I caught up with him, I didn't know he was Hidden Cloud's village's envoy. In order to rescue Hinata, I had no choice but to engage him. He was strong. I was forced to go all out, and I killed him. I didn't mean to. The third Hokage's eyes flickered slightly, though he kept his expression neutral. He nodded. Understood. All of you are dismissed for now. This area is now under the jurisdiction of the Anbu. Send a team to inform Hidden Cloud's village of what's happened. Yes. One of the Anbu said before vanishing with a flicker of movement. None of the others questioned the order. After Hinata was safely returned to her family, everyone else dispersed. Such high-level matters between villages always fell under Anbu authority. Even Asuma couldn't pry further. The third Hokage then ordered the Anbu to search the scene for any remaining clues. Afterward, he returned to his office and stared out the window into the night. That Uchiha kid is lying. Denzo appeared behind him once more, as if conjured by the darkness itself. A battle where he had to go all out? But there's barely any trace of fighting at the scene. Unless the difference in power was overwhelming, there should have been damage. Haru Uchiha. He's becoming more and more interesting. He paused for a moment, then continued. That envoy from Hidden Cloud's village wasn't weak. Stronger than most elite Jonin. About on par with Kurisuke Riga, whom Haru Uchiha also killed. Haru took him down without breaking a sweat. His strength can't be underestimated. The third Hokage stood silently, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the window, saying nothing. He had already come to the same conclusion when Haru gave his report. But he hadn't called it out. Not because he didn't want to. But because he couldn't. Haru's identity was far too sensitive. Tensions with the Uchiha clan were already explosive. To accuse an Uchiha of murdering an allied envoy without cause? That was tantamount to lighting the fuse to a powder keg. Such a move could spiral the entire situation out of control. He already had to worry about how to explain this to the hot-headed Raikage. Dragging the Uchiha into it right now would be suicidal. So, he pretended not to know. Sent everyone away. He'd reassess the situation once things settled. Denzo, as usual, was undeterred by the silence. He continued, slowly and deliberately. With such power, failure was impossible. In other words, Haru Uchiha intentionally killed that Hidden Cloud's village ninja. We all know his reputation. Calm, steady, cunning, composed. Do you really think he didn't understand the consequences of killing a foreign envoy? Or perhaps he did understand. And wanted exactly that outcome. To spark a war between Hidden Leaf Village and Hidden Cloud's village, destabilize the village. And let the Uchiha clan take advantage. Or perhaps this was Fugaku's order all along. The third Hokage still faced away, silent. But Denzo knew him too well. He was shaken. Denzo pressed on. Hidden Leaf Village may still appear strong, but there are eyes on us everywhere. If we go to war with Hidden Cloud's village, especially after a drawn-out internal battle with the Uchiha, what do you think Hidden Sand Village, Hidden Stones Village, and Hidden Mist Village will do? How many vultures will swoop in to carve up what's left? Third. For Hidden Leaf Village's sake, my plan must be enacted. No one will stop me. This time, the third Hokage didn't respond with fury. He didn't snap or argue like before. He simply remained still. Silent. Denzo didn't push further. He stood there, waiting. He knew the silence meant he had won. Eventually, the third Hokage let out a long, heavy sigh. The Uchiha. They were the ones who helped build Hidden Leaf Village alongside the first Hokage. If we slaughter them now, what will future generations think of us? No one will know. Denzo replied, lips curling ever so slightly. There are no perfect walls in this world. The third said quietly. No matter what you do, someone always finds out. Denzo sneered, amused. This will be entirely handled by me. You can wash your hands of it completely. Later, if anything is discovered, you can place the blame on me alone. The third's aged shoulders trembled. He turned to face Denzo. To take on such a sin alone. As it should be. Denzo interrupted, voice cold and resolute. You are the Hokage. The branch that reaches the sky. The symbol of light. I am the root. Hidden in the earth. I exist to cut down anything that threatens Hidden Leaf Village. This is my duty. The third Hokage stared at him. Regret flickered across his face, along with hesitation, sorrow, and something like mourning. In the end, all of it faded into a single, weary sigh. He turned back toward the night beyond the window. Denzo was already gone, vanished as if he had never been there. Chapter 43, Anbu's Surveillance. A strange situation. Haru Uchiha, along with Yui Kurenai and the others, escorted Hinata back home. Afterward, Haru immediately returned to his own residence. What had happened today had been completely outside of his expectations. Because of it, he was forced to step out and expose himself to the public. But it was Hinata who had been kidnapped, not just anyone. Even if it meant risking exposure, he had no choice but to save her. He was well aware that his account of the events was full of holes and would surely raise suspicion. Fortunately, the Uchiha clan downfall night was fast approaching, and he wouldn't be in Hidden Leaf Village for much longer. He doubted anything too serious would happen before then. And even if something did happen. So what? With his current power, there was no one in Hidden Leaf Village who could truly stop him from leaving. After a night of focus training, Haru woke up the next morning expecting to continue the missions he hadn't completed the day before. But because of the chaos from the night before, all mission schedules had been thrown into disarray. Early in the morning, Haru received word that his assigned task was being considered complete, and he was granted a full day of rest. Which meant only one thing: he now had an entire day to begin his fourth simulation. That alone was good news. He was eager to test himself, now that he possessed the Otsutsuki bloodline, Wood Style, Mangekyo Sharingan, and the 80 Gods Vacuum Attack. Could he stand toe-to-toe with the first and second Hokage, revived by impure world reincarnation in their non-peak forms? Time ticked by. Haru immersed himself in training again, steadily improving his abilities. And during this process, he clearly felt someone watching him. It wasn't the masked man, and it wasn't Orochimaru. People of that level wouldn't be so sloppy in their surveillance. It was the third Hokage's forces. The Anbu. As expected, even if things appeared calm on the surface, the higher-ups had already sent shadow operatives to monitor him behind the scenes. Not that this surprised him. After all, the moment he took action, suspicion was inevitable. It couldn't be helped. But Haru didn't do what he'd done before. He didn't drag these people out of the shadows like he had with Orochimaru and the masked man. Instead, he ignored them completely, treating them as if they didn't exist. Because unlike Orochimaru or the masked man, these people posed no real threat to him. And more importantly, to clash with them now would be to declare war on Hidden Leaf Village. That was not a path Haru wanted to take. His system was built around simulating the night of the Uchiha clan's downfall. If he rebelled against Hidden Leaf Village before that night came, he'd be branded a traitor and hunted by the entire village, without having gained the benefits of his next simulation. How could he safely complete his fourth and fifth simulations under those conditions? That was a risk he could not afford to take. So even with his strength, he chose to endure. For now. After all, training wasn't a secret. Let them watch if they wanted. And once the doors were closed and the simulation began, who would be able to see anything then? But while Haru was deep in training, the rest of Hidden Leaf Village was in turmoil over last night's events. The attempted kidnapping of Hinata Hyuga, the daughter of Hayashi Hyuga, patriarch of the Hyuga clan, by shinobi from the Hidden Cloud Village had sent shockwaves through the village. Fortunately, the operation had been foiled by Haru Uchiha, Asuma, and a few others who had returned from their mission just in time. The Cloud's plan had failed. Their envoy had been killed. And Hinata had been rescued. At first, the villagers erupted in celebration. Mocking the Hidden Cloud's failed attempt, they had tried to steal a chicken but ended up losing the rice instead. Many praised the bravery of Asuma, Might Guy, Yui Kurenai, and the others who had taken part in the rescue. Most of the credit, of course, went to Asuma and the others, the loyal shinobi of Hidden Leaf Village. Haru's name, intentionally or not, was overlooked. Even though confirmed reports stated clearly that it had been Haru Uchiha who defeated the Cloud Shinobi and saved Hinata, the narrative remained the same. His role was diminished. His presence, nearly erased. Stranger still was the reaction of the Hyuga clan. Logically speaking, since the person rescued had been the heiress of the Hyuga, the future successor of the clan, this should have been viewed as an enormous debt of gratitude. But there wasn't even a single public expression of thanks. It was downright bizarre. Even if the rescued had been a minor clan member, this silence would have been inappropriate. But this was Hinata, the pride of the Hyuga. The village's leadership was just as quiet as the Hyuga. As word of the event spread like wildfire, the upper echelon remained uncharacteristically silent, as if nothing had ever happened. And those involved in the incident, Haru, Asuma, Might Guy, Hayate, Yui Kurenai, and Yuzuki Ujawa, were nowhere to be found. The development of events became increasingly strange. Some in the village began to sense that something was off. And then, suddenly, the entire atmosphere shifted. The conversation turned from celebration to consequences. The ramifications of killing a diplomatic envoy from the Hidden Cloud inside Hidden Leaf Village as borders could not be ignored. War was no longer just a whisper. It was now a looming possibility. While it was clear Hidden Leaf Village had reason on its side, those who knew the Hidden Cloud and its current Raikage were well aware, reason wasn't their strength. If there were two words to describe the Raikage, they would be, battle maniac. Hot-tempered, impulsive, prone to violence, indifferent to death and destruction. If slighted, he wouldn't hesitate. He'd attack first and worry later. especially since relations between Hidden Leaf Village and the Cloud had never been warm. The second Hokage, Tobi Ramasenshu, had been killed by the Gold and Silver brothers from the Hidden Cloud. A few years ago, Hidden Cloud shinobi had tried to kidnap Kushina Uzumaki. And now, they'd targeted the Hyuga clan, one of the most influential families in the village. Given the Cloud's long-standing ambition to surpass Hidden Leaf Village as the dominant hidden village, this incident could be just the pretext they needed to launch a war. Hidden Leaf Village was no longer the powerhouse it once was. The fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, had died in battle. Of the three legendary Sannin, one had defected, and the other two were missing. What strength remained? The third Hokage, aging, weary, could hardly be expected to face off against the might of the Cloud. As the specter of war loomed overhead, many villagers began to despair. And when fear sets in, people begin to look for someone to blame. Someone had to take responsibility. The entire village couldn't suffer for the actions of one. And so, eyes turned to Haru Uchiha. After all, tensions with the Uchiha clan were already running high. No one liked them. No one trusted them. Letting them bear the blame seemed like a simple, guilt-free solution. The consensus across the village was clear: Haru Uchiha had killed the Hidden Cloud's envoy. And he would bear the consequences alone. Chapter 44, Fugaku Uchiha's comfort. But Haru Uchiha had never heard of such things. For a long time now, he had been immersed in chakra control and ninjutsu training. Even the Anbu hidden in the shadows, constantly monitoring him, couldn't help but marvel. They hadn't expected that besides Might Guy, there would be another ninja in Hidden Leaf Village so fiercely dedicated to his training. No wonder he had achieved so much at such a young age. Haru had thought this quiet routine would continue uninterrupted until his fourth simulation. But unexpectedly, it was broken. That evening, there was a knock at his door. Knock, knock, knock. Haru, are you in there? A voice called out from beyond the door. Haru recognized it instantly. It belonged to one of the Uchiha clan's core members, the same man who, after Haru had agreed to join the rebellion, had enthusiastically invited him to dinner, which Haru had politely declined. I'm here. Haru replied as he rose and opened the door. Outside stood two figures. In addition to the man who had spoken, the other was none other than the head of the Uchiha clan, Fugaku Uchiha. Patriarch. Haru said respectfully, bowing slightly. Fugaku gave a short nod. His expression was as calm and unreadable as ever. But in the next instant, his eyes narrowed, and his aura flared sharply. His gaze snapped toward a corner cloaked in darkness. That was where the Anbu were hiding. Immediately, several Anbu agents stiffened. Retreat. One of them barked. Without a second thought, they used the teleportation jutsu and vanished from the scene. They had been exposed, and there was no point in staying any longer. More importantly, the one who had spotted them was Fugaku, leader of the Uchiha, a man whose pride and power were no small matters. That he had not attacked them outright was a gesture of restraint, a favor, even. Staying any longer would have been suicidal. A strange glint flickered in Haru's eyes. Such sharp perception. Even though the Anbu had quietly retreated to a safe distance after realizing Fugaku's arrival, they were still discovered the moment Fugaku stepped onto the scene. With such heightened awareness, Fugaku's true strength was clearly not to be underestimated. The core member standing beside Fugaku sneered and spat in disgust. Damn those Hidden Leaf Village bastards. Fugaku, however, remained composed. The Anbu had been monitoring the Uchiha clan for years. How could they possibly escape the watchful eye of his Mengekyo Sharingan? And he wasn't surprised that Haru had noticed them either. In fact, he seemed to accept it as natural. Turning to face Haru, he said calmly. Haru, there's something you need to know. Oh? Haru's eyes narrowed slightly as he gestured for them to come inside, already having a suspicion about the reason for their visit. This had to be related to yesterday's events. He moved aside, allowing Fugaku and his companion to enter. After pouring them each a cup of tea, they settled into seats. Before Haru could say anything, the Uchiha clansman seated beside Fugaku slammed a fist on the table and began shouting, recounting the events in Hidden Leaf Village from the previous day. Let me tell you something, Haru. The man growled. You don't know how shameless the people in this village are. When it came time to take credit, they praised the Leaf's own shinobi like Asuma and Might Guy, but your name? Not even mentioned. Then, once rumors started spreading that the Hidden Cloud might retaliate and use this as an excuse for war, guess what they did? They dragged your name right back out and put all the blame on you. Even the Hyuga clan stayed silent. Not a word of gratitude. Nothing. Is the Uchiha clan only good for being scapegoats? We never get the credit, but when shit hits the fan, we're the first to take the fall. Now the villagers are shouting about handing you over to calm the Hidden Cloud's wrath. Ungrateful bastards, all of them. His face had turned red with fury, fists clenched tightly on the table. It was clear that, while his words were spoken on Haru's behalf, the outrage came from the deeper, long-standing injustice suffered by the Uchiha as a whole. What? Haru feigned a look of alarm and confusion. In truth, he had already seen through the situation. He had sensed the change in the villagers' attitudes the previous day when he'd walked the streets of Hidden Leaf Village with Kurenai and Yujou. The rift between Hidden Leaf Village and the Uchiha clan had deepened to the point where they were now practically two opposing factions within the same village. Under such conditions, the people of Hidden Leaf Village would feel no guilt about sacrificing one Uchiha for peace. But what interested Haru more than anything else was Fugaku's reaction. Fugaku was the head of the Uchiha. A man of shadow-level power with Mangekyo Sharingan. On the night of the massacre, he could have resisted, maybe even changed the outcome, yet he chose to die by the hand of his own son. And now, his people were on the verge of being offered up as sacrifices once again. How would he respond this time? Seeing the tension in Haru's face, the Uchiha clansman patted his chest and reassured him loudly. Haru, don't worry. This isn't just your problem. It's the Uchiha's problem. The clan leader and all of us will never agree to hand you over. If worst comes to worst, we'll fight. What, are we Uchiha supposed to bow to these scumbags? His voice boomed through the small house. Haru, playing his part, nodded and murmured his thanks. Throughout all this, Fugaku said nothing. He simply turned his teacup in his hand, sipping quietly now and then, his eyes unreadable. After a pause, he finally looked directly at Haru. Haru, what do you want to do about this? Haru's eyes flickered. Fugaku's question was telling. He hadn't said, "Don't worry, the clan has your back." He had asked Haru, "What do you want to do?" Still, Haru didn't hesitate. "Patriarch, I will follow your lead." Fugaku gave a small nod and took another sip of tea. Then he waved a hand, signaling the other man to step outside. Once they were alone, Fugaku's voice turned softer, yet more penetrating. "Haru, what do you think of war?" Haru answered plainly. "I don't like war." Fugaku hummed in understanding. "I remember. Your parents died during the Third Great Ninja War. You were also a victim of that bloodshed." His voice turned distant, eyes clouded with memory. Then, after a pause, he asked again. "If one day you had the power to prevent a war, what would you choose to do?" This time, he looked straight at Haru, eyes sharp with meaning. He knew Haru was no fool. He would understand the implication behind the question. Haru returned his gaze calmly. "Ah, so this is what it's come to, Fugaku. You haven't changed at all." Facing Denzo's slow strangulation, he gave in one step at a time. He watched his clan walk toward annihilation, and in the end, he had his son become the blade to finish the job. He would never make an enemy of Hidden Leaf Village, not even for the sake of one of his own. Not even for me. Chapter 45, Only the weak cannot control their destiny. After a while, Haru Uchiha responded. "That depends on the price you pay." "What if? It's your life?" Fugaku looked directly into Haru's eyes. Haru met his gaze without flinching. "I don't want to." Unwilling. It was clearly not the answer Fugaku had hoped to hear. Yet, to Haru's surprise, Fugaku didn't appear angry or disappointed. Instead, he gave a faint smile, shook his head, exhaled slowly, and said, "Yeah, it's your own life. Who would willingly give it up?" Haru remained silent. But the tense atmosphere between them had dissolved. Fugaku drank the last of his tea and patted Haru on the shoulder. "I'll do my best to protect you," he said. "But you need to understand something. I won't gamble with the safety of the Uchiha clan. Our rebellion is still in the preparatory stages. Cutting ties with Hidden Leaf Village now would gain us nothing and only doom the clan to failure. You're a smart man. You must realize that, often, we are powerless. No one truly controls their life. Not you. Not me. This world doesn't bend to your will. The longer you live, the higher you climb, the more you'll came to see that reality is full of helplessness, pain, and emptiness." At these words, a distant look crossed Fugaku's face, as if he were lost in memories. After a pause, he added softly, "Stay home and rest for the next few days. I'll send someone to contact you if anything comes up." With that, he set down his cup and left. Haru Uchiha remained seated, unmoving. People can't control their own lives? Hey. That's the excuse of the powerless. Haru believed in something else, that his fate was his own to command. No one, no matter who they were, had the right to dictate his future. Fugaku's visit didn't shake Haru's beliefs or stir any emotion within him. From the beginning, Haru had never relied on anyone else. He had long known that strength, true strength, was the only thing he could depend on. And so, once Fugaku left, Haru resumed his training without hesitation. At exactly 12, Noon the next day. The fourth simulation began. The system is starting simulation. Haru spoke aloud. The Uchiha Clan Massacre Night simulation begins. Current fixed abilities. Otsutsuki physique, gold, possesses extreme regeneration, nearing immortality when mastered. Can absorb ninjutsu and wield almost limitless chakra. Known as the immortal body, wood style, gold, a legendary KK Genkai combining earth and water chakra natures. Developed by Hashirama Senshu, it allows the user to generate and manipulate wood infused with chakra, functioning as a living force. 80 Gods Vacuum Attack, gold, a supreme taijutsu that transforms massive chakra into countless physical strikes, producing devastating shockwaves with each blow. Shake the world with the Sage Path, both offensive and defensive, an unrelenting fist. Currently available abilities: Immortality, purple, no matter the injury, death does not come. Recovery is astounding. Elemental Mastery, purple, greatly amplifies the power of all elemental ninjutsu. Chakra plus 500, blue, slightly increases chakra reserves. Haru scrolled through the options, eyes scanning the list. As expected, no new golden abilities appeared. At his current level, even purple abilities offered limited progression. True leaps in strength required more golden tier abilities. But, he mused, even scraps are meat. Any improvement, however minor, was still worth it. With a practiced touch, Haru made his selections. Otsutsuki physique, gold, wood style, gold, 80 Gods Vacuum Attack, gold, immortality, purple, elemental mastery, purple, chakra plus 500, blue, 6 in total. 3 gold, 2 purple, 1 blue. A luxurious combination by any standard. Ability selection complete, initiating Uchiha Clan Massacre Night simulation. The world around Haru shifted. Once again, he was thrust into the night he knew all too well. But this time, the setting had changed drastically. He was no longer in his room. Instead, he found himself in a dark, damp chamber. It was pitch black save for a narrow window through which a few weak rays of light filtered. This place. Is it the Hidden Leaf Village Police Force detention cell? For Haru, the location was not unfamiliar. He had worked here for years. The layout, the atmosphere, he recognized it immediately. But why was he here now? Shouldn't he have begun the simulation from his room? Haru's brows furrowed in thought. According to previous simulations, real-life events influenced how each simulation unfolded. In all prior scenarios, he'd always begun in his own quarters. This time, something had changed. The difference had to be tied to real-world developments. The killing of the envoy from Hidden Cloud's village. It had finally come to this. Haru's eyes narrowed. In the original timeline, the envoy from Hidden Cloud's village had attempted to kidnap Hinata Hyuga. He was discovered and killed by Hayashi Hyuga. Hidden Cloud's village then demanded retribution, threatening war. They insisted on Hayashi's corpse. To prevent bloodshed, Hayashi's twin brother was sacrificed instead. But in this altered life, it was Haru who had saved Hinata. And now, that same curse had fallen on him. After thinking it through, Haru understood the core of the situation. It was clear, Hidden Leaf Village's leadership and perhaps even the Uchiha clan were planning to hand him over. All in the name of peace. How noble. So noble that sacrificing one life was justified. Haru let out a cold, derisive snort. Once, he hadn't felt too strongly about Hidden Leaf Village or even the Uchiha clan. He had no deep affection, but no deep hate either. Now, all he felt was contempt and mockery. Especially for the powers at the top, the cowardice, the rot, the hypocrisy. He hated it all. He rose and walked toward the thick iron door of the cell. With his current power, such a door posed no obstacle. He had likely let himself be locked in merely to ensure a quiet environment for his next simulation. He activated his chakra, preparing to break through. Just then, a sound came from beyond the door. Chapter 46, Denzo, am I not strong enough? Why aren't you surprised? Clatter. A heavy, crisp sound rang out as iron chains clashed. Haru Uchiha immediately sensed movement. Several people were approaching. He stopped what he was doing and turned his gaze toward the door, eyes cold and indifferent. Sure enough, moments later, the iron door creaked open. Outside stood more than a dozen masked shinobi clad in standard issue gear. Root operatives. Leading them was a man with white bandages wrapped tightly around his head, even covering his left eye. The only visible eye gleamed with feral resentment. Denzo Shimura. Denzo's low nine narrowed as he took in the sight of Haru standing calmly in the cell, not the slightest trace of fear or panic in his posture. A flicker of surprise passed across Denzo's face, but it vanished quickly, replaced with his usual dark and unreadable expression. He raised his hand slightly and gestured. Without a word, the root shinobi surged forward. Silent and murderous. Except for the two stationed at Denzo's flanks, The rest rushed Haru with lethal precision. No questions. No warnings. Only killing intent. Swish. 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 Dozens of shuriken hissed through the air like a deadly rainstorm. In the narrow confines of the cell, dodging was all but impossible. Fire style, great fireball. A massive fireball exploded from Haru's mouth, roaring forward in a wave of blistering heat. The fireball quickly grew in size, the hot pressure displacing the air in a pulsing wave. Shuriken melted midair, others were flung away like leaves in a storm. The fireball charged ahead, unhindered, a rolling tide of flame and fury. The root shinobi's expressions changed as panic set in. They hadn't expected this. Water style, water wall. Earth style, earth flow wall. Jutsu activated one after another, desperate defenses rising in a dome around them. But it wasn't enough. The fireball smashed into the defenses with explosive force, detonating with a thunderous blast that sent scalding air and debris in every direction. Hiss. 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 Water-style techniques evaporated instantly, vanishing into steam. Earth-style barriers shattered like glass under a hammer. And that overwhelming fireball kept coming. The impact hurled bodies through the air. Burned, bruised, broken. They landed in crumpled heaps. Only Denzo remained untouched. The blast wave stopped just short of him, as if it had struck an invisible wall. Denzo's eye narrowed further. Haru Uchiha. The reports only mentioned your exceptional taijutsu. No one said your ninjutsu was this advanced. He smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. Interesting. Haru met his gaze, calm as ever, a trace of mockery in his eyes. He had no respect for Denzo. In fact, he loathed him. Denzo was the kind of man who turned peace into justification for murder. A manipulator in the shadows. The hand behind the knife that slaughtered the Uchiha clan. The two root operatives flanking Denzo prepared to move in, but Denzo raised a hand. No need. Let me handle him myself. He stepped forward and slowly unwrapped the bandages around his right shoulder, revealing a grotesque, pale limb. Flesh like wet chalk, pulsing with unnatural life. It looked eerily like White Zetsu's body. Hashirama cells. Haru said flatly. He recognized it immediately. But something was off. Denzo didn't yet have the rows of Sharingan embedded in his arm. That would come later, after the Uchiha massacre. This was the earlier stage of Denzo's experimentation. With only the cells of Hashirama Senju, Denzo's wood style could never reach its full potential. Unlike Haru, who possessed the complete genetic inheritance of wood style. His was the real thing. Denzo watched Haru closely, expecting shock. This grotesque arm was the result of years of forbidden experimentation. Every other shinobi who'd seen it had reacted in horror or awe, but Haru remained unfazed. Denzo scowled. He assumed Haru was simply too young to grasp the magnitude of what he was witnessing. He was wrong. Wood style, explosive tree gun technique. Denzo's arm flared to life, the grotesque limb rapidly mutating. A massive tree erupted from it, growing at an impossible speed. Thick, jagged branches shot outward like spears, bursting through walls and floor alike. The prison shook with the force. Steel walls groaned and warped under the pressure, the reinforced cell beginning to collapse. But Haru didn't even blink. He blurred away using the teleportation jutsu, weaving effortlessly between the chaotic onslaught like a ghost. Too slow. Too crude. This was the great wood style Denzo boasted about? Pathetic. Wood style, deep forest emergence. The earth trembled as the jutsu activated. From beneath the floor, seedlings erupted. Then sprouted into trees. They grew at breakneck speed, thickening, branching out, coiling upward in a web of bark and leaves. The trees became titanic, their roots tearing apart the foundation of the prison. Denzo's tree, once dominant and ferocious, was swallowed up by the ever-growing forest. Its branches splintered, snapped, and were absorbed, turned into just another part of Haru's sea of trees. The entire Uchiha district transformed in an instant into a sprawling, living forest. Denzo's face twisted with disbelief. This is wood style. He really possesses wood style. How? How can he use Hashirama's KK Genkai? But he had no time to ponder. The forest moved. Dozens of vines and branches lashed out from every angle. Unlike the blunt force trauma of Denzo's wood style, Haru's technique was precise. Graceful. Controlled. Lethal. Each vine struck with calculated force, wrapping around limbs, targeting weaknesses, restricting chakra flow. Denzo realized the truth too late. Haru's wood style wasn't just stronger. It was mastered. His chakra control was beyond precise. Not a single leaf grew where it wasn't needed. Not a single ounce of chakra was wasted. That, more than anything, set him far above Denzo. Retreat. Denzo barked. No hesitation. No pride. He knew when he was outmatched. Even as the leader of Root, with all his secrets and power, Denzo understood one thing: Haru was far more dangerous than the reports had ever said. He still had trump cards. Deadly ones. But now wasn't the time to use them. Not when an unknown masked man loomed in the shadows. Denzo vanished in a blur of motion, taking his wounded and unconscious subordinates with him, fleeing into the depths of Hidden Leaf Village's underworld. The forest settled. Haru Uchiha stood alone amid the towering trees he had summoned. His expression hadn't changed. The darkness was growing. And this time, he would not be content to simply survive it. He would bend it to his will. Chapter 47, A Battle of Illusions. After Haru Uchiha unleashed Wood Style, birth of the Sea of Trees, the entire Uchiha clan compound transformed into a vast and oppressive forest, thick with vegetation and shadow. To an outsider, it might have looked like a paradise, green, lush, teeming with life. But only those caught inside knew the truth: this place was a nightmare. Every tree, every leaf, every twisting vine was an extension of Haru Uchiha's will. They weren't just part of the terrain, they were his eyes, his ears, his limbs. Here, within this monstrous forest of chakra-infused wood, Haru was omniscient. Every tremble in the air, every heartbeat, every ounce of movement, he felt it. He saw it. He controlled it. Within this domain, Haru reigned supreme. No movement escaped his notice. No escape was possible, unless one had overwhelming power capable of obliterating everything, or a defense so absolute it rendered attacks irrelevant. Otherwise, there was no way out. Denzo Shimura was now running for his life within that living maze. Despite being well into his 60s, Denzo's speed and reflexes were still formidable, sharp as any elite shinobi's. He darted through the vines with surprising agility, more fluid than even the two Root operatives flanking him. But even for a Kage-level shinobi like Denzo, Haru's relentless assault was beginning to show its toll. Vines shot out from every direction, slithering like serpents, striking with precision and speed. If it had just been one or two vines, they wouldn't have posed a threat. Even a Genin could evade them with ease. But this... hundreds. Thousands. A living tide of branches and thorns and limbs surged toward him, blotting out the light and choking the air with the scent of bark and bloodlust. Denzo and his two elite guards fought desperately, casting jutsu after jutsu to clear a path. But the moment they created space, more vines rushed in like a wave crashing over rocks. They didn't stop. They didn't hesitate. Even Denzo's power was starting to falter. As for his two guards, they were faring worse. One had already sustained a deep slash across his arm, barely avoiding being entangled completely. If the other hadn't intervened, he would have been shredded. Denzo's face twisted with frustration. He had underestimated this. He thought he had come prepared, elite Root operatives at his side, and the knowledge that Haru Uchiha was just an individual with strong taijutsu. But that intel was worthless. Lies, or at best, dangerously outdated. This wasn't just a physically skilled shinobi. This was someone on the level of a Kage, and he wielded the legendary Wood Style of the first Hokage himself. Denzo gritted his teeth. If he had known it would be this much trouble, he never would have come. Still, escaping was the priority now. He had options, techniques that might reverse the situation, but they came with a cost. Denzo wasn't ready to burn through his trump cards yet. There were other ways. Itachi. I know you're there. Denzo's voice cut through the chaos, calm but firm, as he dodged another lash of branches. Come out. Kill him. Kill Haru Uchiha. There was no response, just the rustle of leaves, the snap of splintering wood, and the hiss of vines dragging across the earth. Denzo's expression darkened, his voice low and threatening. Itachi. Don't forget our agreement. The massacre of the Uchiha was part of your deal, wasn't it? Still, silence. Then, Haru's eyes suddenly narrowed. He sensed something, a powerful chakra presence, colder than steel and darker than the forest itself. In the distance, deep in the shadows, two blood-red eyes lit up. 3 Tomoe spun slowly, connected like a blade. Mangekyo Sharingan. Fire Style, Great Fireball. Fire Style, Phoenix Fireclaw. Fire Style, Great Fire Dragon Technique. One after another, the Fire Style ninjutsu came in a blur. The hand seals were executed at a speed beyond human comprehension. Barely had one jutsu completed before the next ignited in its wake. A dozen jutsu burst into existence simultaneously, releasing a maelstrom of fire across the forest. Flames roared with a vengeance, devouring everything they touched. The once vibrant forest was swallowed by a raging inferno, every branch igniting in a flash of orange and red. The firestorm raged with such intensity that even the ground cracked from the heat. Denzo watched from within the inferno, his forehead beaded with sweat, his jaw clenched tightly. He had lost too much in this battle already. His physical strength was waning. Age was catching up. Even for him, the continuous strain of battle was beginning to hurt. And now, from the smoke and fire, a figure emerged. Silent, red eyes still glowing. Itachi Uchiha. Itachi, well done. Denzo muttered without turning to look. Kill him. Kill Haru Uchiha. Hidden Leaf Village will honor its promise to you. Itachi said nothing but stepped forward, moving to face Haru directly. Haru's expression changed. Amusement flickered in his eyes. They had fought countless times before. In previous simulations, he had been crushed almost instantly. Then he had resisted. Then dominated. Now, he held the 80 Gods vacuum fist in his arsenal, a god-tier technique. This was no longer the same battlefield. Itachi stood still, and Haru mirrored him. Neither moved. But everyone around them knew, the fight had already begun. When Uchiha clash, it is not with fists or blades. It is a war of eyes. Illusion against illusion. Ganjutsu versus Kanjutsu. Itachi Uchiha, a prodigy among prodigies, the one shinobi who had mastered illusion to a terrifying level. To call him a genius in this field would be an understatement. Denzo, watching carefully, answered before anyone asked. Will Itachi win? Of course. He said, voice hard and assured. In the art of illusion, no one is a match for Itachi Uchiha. This wasn't a boast. This was fact. For decades, no shinobi had ever approached Itachi's level in Ganjutsu. Whatever advantage Haru Uchiha might have in ninjutsu or taijutsu didn't matter here. This was Itachi's domain. Denzo's two subordinates nodded silently. They believed it. They'd seen Itachi's illusions in battle. The absolute control. The untraceable attacks. The way enemies collapsed without even understanding what had happened. This was Itachi Uchiha, a specter of death wrapped in calm and silence. Even Haru's power couldn't change that. None of them intervened. They wouldn't dare. In a battle like this, their interference would only be a liability, an invitation to die. Their only job now was to watch. And wait. Denzo's eyes narrowed. After a long pause, he said softly, his voice low and ominous, the winner has already been decided. Chapter 48, Only Illusion Can Defeat Illusion. As Denzo's words fell, Itachi Uchiha groaned. Two distinct trails of blood flowed down from his Mangekyo Sharingan eyes, tracing his cheeks like crimson tears. His entire aura deflated in an instant. He immediately activated the teleportation jutsu and retreated into the distance. Haru Uchiha didn't pursue. The outcome had been decided. Itachi Uchiha had lost. Denzo's brow furrowed deeply. His first thought was that Itachi had intentionally thrown the fight. But he quickly dismissed the idea. He knew Itachi well, and their deal was ironclad. Itachi wouldn't hold back. Which meant. Denzo's expression darkened with growing concern. Even though Itachi Uchiha was young, his strength was already close to incomprehensible. In terms of raw ability, he was not much weaker than Denzo himself. But now, he'd been defeated, and not in a battle of physical strength or ninjutsu. He had lost in Ganjutsu. The one field in which Itachi reigned supreme, where he was said to be unmatched even among the elite Uchiha. A wielder of the Mangekyo Sharingan losing in a Ganjutsu battle? Impossible. Unless. The opponent also had the Mangekyo Sharingan. The realization hit Denzo like a blow to the chest. His single visible eye locked on Haru Uchiha, narrowing sharply. And Haru, as if in response, allowed his eyes to be fully seen. Within the crimson light, the three Tomoe spun and joined together into a blade-shaped pattern. Mangekyo Sharingan. Denzo's breath hitched. His face, usually unreadable, betrayed rare shock. As he had feared, only Mangekyo Sharingan could defeat Mangekyo Sharingan. Even though he'd already suspected it, seeing it with his own eyes brought an overwhelming wave of dread. The wood-style, Hidden Leaf Village's fabled bloodline limit belonging to the first Hokage, Senju Hashirama. And the Uchiha clan's ultimate Jujutsu, Mangekyo Sharingan. To think both would appear in one individual. Haru Uchiha. Such a person. Must not be allowed to live. Go. Kill him. Denzo's voice was low and calm, but his exposed eye gleamed with murderous intent. The two root ninjas beside him hesitated. Kill him? Was he serious? He possessed both Mangekyo Sharingan and wood style. Even Itachi Uchiha had failed to take him down. How could they? This was suicide. Humphrey? Denzo glanced at them with cold disdain. That alone made them flinch back. Their fear of Denzo outweighed their survival instincts. Clenching their teeth, they moved. They had no choice. Though elite Jonin, these root members weren't known for brute strength. They were specialists, each possessing unique talents that made them valuable in support roles, not front-line combat. But orders were orders. Secret technique, poisonous insect jutsu. The ninja on the left launched forward. His hands formed seals, and insects began swarming from every part of his body. They surged across the battlefield like a tidal wave of black, seeking Haru's chakra. He was clearly from the Aburame clan. The second ninja followed swiftly. Mind transfer jutsu. No sound. No light. To an untrained eye, it looked like nothing had happened. But those familiar with Yamanaka techniques knew the danger. While most ninjutsu attacked the body, the mind transfer technique targeted the soul, attempting to take over the enemy's consciousness directly. Of course, it had very low success rates in solo combat. It typically required precise coordination with a team. That was how Hidden Leaf Village's famous Inoshikacho trio fought, with synchronized team strategies. But now, one Yamanaka against Haru Uchiha. It was laughable. Haru didn't even flinch. As the wave of insects surged toward him, he raised a hand and calmly unleashed a jutsu. Fire style, great fireball. A massive inferno burst forth, roaring into a sphere of searing flame. It rolled across the battlefield like a flaming meteor. The dense cloud of insects, which had almost blocked out the sky, instantly combusted on contact. Before they could even reach Haru, the heat alone incinerated hundreds. Screams of burning insects filled the air. The Aburame's face twisted with grief. He immediately directed the remainder of the swarm to scatter, attempting to minimize losses. But the offensive had already collapsed. As for the Yamanaka, he was still pressing the mind transfer jutsu. Pointless. It didn't even register on Haru. If they weren't both wearing root-issued masks, Denzo would have seen just how pathetic and desperate their expressions had become. This was hopeless. They weren't attackers. They were support. Yet they'd been sent to the front lines against a monster. This wasn't just dangerous. It was a death sentence. At that moment, the root operatives who had been spread out across the surrounding area finally arrived, drawn by the battle's intensity. They arrived to a scene straight out of a nightmare. They froze as they took it in. Mangekyo Sharingan. Wood style. Itachi Uchiha defeated. What kind of monster was this? All units, attack. Kill him. Denzo's voice thundered. Dozens of root ninjas surged forward like a black tide, surrounding Haru from all directions. Trying to overwhelm me with numbers? Haru chuckled, then formed hand seals. Wood style, multi-wood clone technique. He'd faced Root's human wave tactics before. He had a solution. No allies? Then create some. But this technique required a massive amount of chakra. Most shinobi, even S-rank, couldn't use it. But Haru was not most shinobi. He had Otsutsuki blood. He had Mangekyo Sharingan. He had wood style. Only someone like him could use it in battle. As he completed the jutsu, identical figures emerged beside him. 1, 2, 5, 10. Then 20, 30, 50. The clones multiplied rapidly, too many to count. Root operatives faltered. Panic set in. One Haru Uchiha was bad enough. Now there were dozens. No, possibly hundreds. Even knowing clones weren't as strong as the original didn't ease the terror of being surrounded by Mangekyo Sharingan users. The atmosphere grew suffocating. Denzo narrowed his eyes. This was getting out of control. He had hoped that sheer numbers, paired with Aburame and Yamanaka techniques, would suppress Haru quickly. But the clone technique had turned everything on its head. Another miscalculation. Too many of those today. And the cost might just be fatal. Chapter 49, Group Fighting Tactics. In just a short moment, dozens of identical Haru Uchiha appeared in the center of the battlefield. At first glance, their number rivaled that of the Root Organization's ninjas. Everyone around was stunned. Such an enormous amount of chakra. It rivaled the power of those legendary tailed beasts. Haru's expression was grim as he scanned the surrounding Root operatives. Dozens of identical Haru Uchiha began performing ninjutsu simultaneously. Fire style, Phoenix fire technique. Huge flames erupted, scattering in all directions. Like blazing cannonballs, the fireballs exploded outward with scorching heat. From a distance, the sight resembled meteors streaking through the night sky. Beautiful and terrifying all at once. Beneath that stunning appearance, a deadly intent burned fiercely. Each fireball carried overwhelming, terrifying power. The speed of these flaming projectiles was nearly impossible to dodge. Only those handpicked by Denzo to join the Root Organization could survive such assaults. They were true masters. Their strength exceeded that of ordinary elite jonin, and their experience in life-or-death battles made them psychologically formidable. This was the fierce power of Root. But now, faced with Haru Uchiha's relentless offensive, even they looked solemn. Balls of fire, accompanied by scorching airwaves, shot toward them. Logically, a clone's power pales compared to the original. Its chakra reserves and the strength of released ninjutsu are always at least one tier lower. Yet, with dozens of clones attacking at once, The power behind each jutsu was still awe-inspiring. No weakening was visible. It was terrifying. Though still some distance away, the root ninjas could already feel the unbearable heat. Water style, water wall. A group of water style users quickly formed a defensive barrier. Streams of rushing water surged from the ground, rising to form a natural wall. The intense heat vanished in an instant, replaced by a cool, refreshing sensation. But no one took this relief lightly. They knew the real danger was yet to come. Hiss. Suddenly, a series of sharp hissing sounds echoed through the dark night, accompanied by swirling steam. The fireballs collided fiercely against the water wall before extinguishing. At first, the root ninjas barely reacted. But soon, a growing unease settled among them. The sheer number of fireballs was terrifying. Almost unbelievable, endless like a flood with no end. Moreover, the power carried by these fireballs was truly astounding. After countless impacts, the water wall's temperature soared, and the water began to boil. Denzo, watching the battle, frowned deeper and deeper. Just one person was suppressing dozens of root ninjas all by himself. Even he would feel drained doing the same. Yet Haru Uchiha seemed remarkably relaxed. This is bad. Denzo exhaled deeply, his gaze drifting away from the battlefield into the darkness. He muttered quietly. Aren't you going to make a move? Ha! A swirling vortex slowly formed in the dark void. Two figures appeared. Masked Man and Orochimaru. Is Hidden Leaf Village deserted? They can't even handle a little guy like this? Orochimaru sneered mockingly. The masked man beside him stood silently, arms crossed, watching without any sign of action. Humphrey. Denzo snorted coldly and silently distanced himself from the two, leaving no trace behind. He didn't trust either of them. Back on the battlefield, the fight raged on, but the outcome hung by a thread. Haru Uchiha's extraordinary abilities were overpowering dozens of root ninjas on his own. Denzo's expression grew increasingly ugly. Tonight, the Uchiha clan was being annihilated once again. The root organization boasts elite troops, but they can't do a thing against Haru Uchiha. This will make people look down on them. Especially with the masked man and Orochimaru watching. Both held no goodwill toward Hidden Leaf Village. And there was Haru Uchiha, embroiled in a massive battle. Hidden Leaf Village had massacred the Uchiha clan and sought to kill him. The hatred between them had reached an almost irreversible boiling point. They were destined enemies. If the right time, place, and people weren't seized to deal with this now, the future trouble would be unimaginable. This man was a powerhouse wielding both wood style and the Mangekyo Sharingan. But could anyone stop him? Denzo knew the answer all too well. It was impossible. Even if he acted, he lacked confidence. Just as he was hesitating, Orochimaru suddenly said, Denzo, I can help you. But I have a condition. A condition? Denzo's eyes flickered sharply. Orochimaru licked his lips, eyes gleaming with greed. I want his body. Denzo's eyes narrowed, hesitating for a moment, then nodded. Fine. The deal was struck. The masked man watched coldly. Even as Orochimaru, nominally his subordinate, bargained with Denzo, he said nothing. This was his organization. Akatsuki. Beyond completing assigned tasks on time, most of the time they enjoyed relative freedom without his full control. Orochimaru smiled wickedly, his pale, creepy face twisted into a grin as he stepped forward. On the battlefield, in just minutes, Haru Uchiha had suppressed dozens of root ninjas by himself, displaying shocking power. Just as he prepared to eliminate everyone, two powerful auras suddenly rushed toward him. Almost simultaneously, the root ninjas received orders to retreat. With Orochimaru now intervening, Denzo no longer needed to expend his own energy. Haru glanced sideways. He saw two figures standing not far off. They were the first Hokage Hashirama Senju and the second Hokage Dobirama Senju. Both resurrected by the impure world reincarnation. Chapter 50, The Strongest Physical Technique. Haru Uchiha stared down at the two legendary figures before him. Icons whose names echoed throughout the ninja world. His blood-red Mangekyo Sharingan flared unnervingly bright, casting an eerie glow over his eyes. A surge of agitation and adrenaline coursed through his entire body. In their previous encounters, he had been defeated repeatedly by these two. But now, wielding the 80 Gods airstrike, he was unsure how this battle would end. Haru dispersed all his shadow clones. Without multiple clones, his tactic would be useless. Shadow clones were incredibly versatile. They confused opponents, set traps, and enabled complex strategies. But right now, Haru desired none of that. What he craved was a genuine confrontation. A true clash of power. Especially in simulations like this, such direct combat best revealed the real difference in strength. Before him, the reincarnated first and second Hokage advanced without warning. Suddenly, Several thick branches erupted from the ground, rapidly twisting and extending upwards, aiming to ensnare Haru. There hadn't even been any hand seals. The ninjutsu was instantaneous. There was no time to react. Even Haru was momentarily taken aback. He understood clearly that these impure world reincarnations were incomplete, imperfect. Thus, the first and second Hokage's power had not reached their original peak. Still, the strength they displayed was enough to astonish him. The ability to cast techniques without hand signs was already remarkable. Their vast combat experience, combined with an endless array of astonishing ninjutsu. It was breathtaking. Haru swiftly activated his teleportation jutsu to dodge. But it was too late. The branches had already wrapped tightly around him. Yet, as they constricted, the real Haru suddenly vanished, replaced by a wooden log. Wood clone. Substitution jutsu. At the critical moment, Haru used this classic ninja technique, avoiding the surprise attack. But before relief could settle, danger struck again. This time, it was the second Hokage. Senju Tobirama, the master of numerous forbidden jutsu, the creator of many powerful techniques. His strength might not rival Hashirame's, known as the god of shinobi. But it was far from weak. Especially with his arsenal of devastating ninjutsu, defense seemed impossible. While the first Hokage attacked head-on, Tobirama struck silently from behind. His speed and cunning movements were breathtaking. Haru had just deployed the substitution technique to evade the first Hokage's assault. Yet Tobirama had already appeared behind him, wielding a kunai and plunging it fiercely downward. Haru scrambled to block. Before he could raise a proper defense, the second Hokage vanished in an instant. An overwhelming sense of danger rippled through Haru. Thanks to the terrifying insight granted by his Mengekyo Sharingan, Haru caught subtle traces of Tobirama's movements. But before he could fully react, Tobirama disappeared again. Flying Thunder God. Haru instantly recognized the space-time ninjutsu. The famed Flying Thunder God technique. Before making any move, Tobirama had already thrown multiple kunai marked with his teleportation seals. Though they seemed scattered at random, they were carefully placed to create instantaneous teleport points. That's how Tobirama moved so rapidly. Haru's Mengekyo Sharingan gave him perception beyond ordinary ninja's reach. This heightened perception alone was an incredible advantage. Yet perception was only the beginning. To counter Tobirama, Haru needed lightning-fast reflexes and impeccable timing to evade attacks. Few ninjas, no matter how skilled in taijutsu, could manage that. But Haru was different. Blessed with his Mengekyo Sharingan and the Otsutsuki lineage's enhanced physicality, his body moved beyond normal limits. When he first awakened this golden ability, he had already defeated Kurokiraga, one of the 7 ninja swordsmen, relying solely on his physical prowess. Later, he had injured the careless masked man through pure strength. Now, he was even stronger. His raw physicality alone could challenge most Kage-level opponents. So against Tobirama's Flying Thunder God, Haru was far from helpless. He could hold his own. But the tide shifted once more. Because now the first Hokage intervened. Branches erupted from the earth, twisting and wending toward Haru. Caught between Tobirama's sudden teleportation attacks and the first Hokage's long-range wood techniques, Haru felt immense pressure. Even Tobirama, the weaker of the two, was far beyond ordinary Kage strength. With Hashirama alongside him, Haru barely managed to fend them off without injury. If another Kage-level shinobi of equal power appeared, he doubted he could last a minute. Still, as the battle dragged on, Haru realized he was outnumbered. 2 foes were overwhelming him. To shift the momentum, he needed a new strategy. 80 God's Airstrike. Instantly, Haru created distance and unleashed the golden technique he had recently acquired but never before used. As the ninjutsu activated, he concentrated vast amounts of chakra into his palm, which erupted in a blinding white light. A heavy, oppressive aura radiated outward. No explanation was necessary, everyone present recognized the unleashing of a devastating jutsu. Even the reincarnated first and second Hokage stiffened under the pressure. They reacted immediately, launching countermeasures, doing everything possible to interrupt Haru's chakra buildup. But Haru remained calm, moving with the same steady grace as before, ignoring the incoming attacks. He was confident he could complete his technique before they reached him. 80 God's Airstrike. A bloodline technique inherited from Kaguya Otsutsuki herself. Renowned as the strongest physical technique in the entire Naruto world. Its offensive and defensive power was terrifying beyond words. When Kaguya used this jutsu, she needed no preparation. She could manifest it at will. But for Haru, performing such an overwhelming technique at his current level was far from simple. Firstly, his chakra control wasn't yet perfect enough for instantaneous execution. He needed precious moments to concentrate and prepare. As the tension in the air thickened, the battlefield seemed to hold its breath. The clash between legendary Hokage and the fierce scion of the Uchiha clan was about to reach a new, explosive stage. Chapter 51, Combat Power Sharpener. The technique required time to build, its power not instantly unleashed. This limitation left openings, vulnerabilities the enemy could exploit. But there was no avoiding it. Fortunately, Haru Uchiha's chakra had now solidified, dense and potent, ready to be wielded. Almost simultaneously, the first Hokage's wood-style jutsu and the second Hokage's flying thunder god technique surged toward him, poised to end the battle decisively. At that moment, fists of raw, devastating chakra coalesced in Haru's palms, radiating an aura capable of obliterating all in its path. With a fierce motion, he unleashed them. No one could fathom the sheer terror of this ninjutsu. In mere seconds, the battlefield transformed. The first Hokage's wood-style, a forest of twisting, towering branches, shattered into splinters under Haru's onslaught. The second Hokage, Tobirama Senshu, couldn't evade in time. Half his body was pulverized by the strike. Yet, as a product of the impure world reincarnation, his immortality kicked in, his form knitting back together swiftly. Even so, the sight was chilling. In one fleeting moment, Haru had repelled the combined assault of the first and second Hokages. He'd even grievously wounded one. Hashirama Senshu, revered as the god of shinobi. And Tobirama, whose mastery of space-time ninjutsu was legendary, had been pushed back together. True, they weren't at their peak, bound by the limitations of their reincarnated state, but the feat was staggering nonetheless. The morale of the root organization's ninjas plummeted. Moments ago, they'd charged with a mix of shame, rage, and fear, only to be crushed. Now, despair gripped them, coupled with a gnawing doubt, could such a man even be defeated? Even Denzo and Orochimaru, both Kage-level powerhouses, wore grim expressions. As seasoned warriors, they instinctively measured themselves against Haru's display, wondering if they could fare better. The answer was painfully clear: not only would they fail to match him, they might fare worse. The second Hokage, with his unparalleled flying thunder god technique, hadn't escaped Haru's attack. A living shinobi, lacking the regenerative crutch of impure world reincarnation, would have been annihilated by such a blow. Could they outpace Tobirama's speed? Hardly. The masked man, ever enigmatic, stood unmoved, his demeanor as cold and calculated as ever. Whether the face beneath that mask remained so composed after witnessing Haru's power was anyone's guess. The battle raged on. Hashirama's wood-style conjured writhing, serpentine vines, while Tobirama flickered in and out of existence with flying thunder god, each strike a deadly dance of precision. Haru countered with his 80 God's vacuum attack, a technique of unparalleled ferocity. It met their assaults head-on, yielding spectacular results. Tobirama's body was smashed apart multiple times, only to reform through the cursed resurrection. Even Hashirama, the god of shinobi, wasn't spared, his wooden constructs crumbling under the relentless barrage. Were it not for the infinite regeneration of impure world reincarnation, the fight would have ended long ago. But Haru's chakra wasn't limitless. The 80 God's vacuum attack, while devastating, demanded an immense toll. Only his unique Otsutsuki-enhanced physique and the Mangekyo Sharingan's augmentation allowed him to sustain it this long. Yet, after relentless clashes, his reserves were dwindling. Simulation failed, a translucent message materialized in the air, declaring the outcome of this trial. Even with the golden prowess of the 80 God's vacuum attack, Haru had failed to survive the Uchiha clan's massacre. But this attempt was worlds apart from his previous efforts. In his third simulation, Haru had been overwhelmed, perpetually on the defensive. This time, the 80 God's vacuum attack shifted the tide, granting him dominance over the first and second Hokages. His defeat stemmed not from a lack of power but from the insurmountable advantage of his foe's immortality. The reincarnated Hokages possessed infinite chakra and endless regeneration, equivalent to infinite health and stamina. Haru, for all his might, was mortal. His chakra depletion was real, and it had dragged him down. Still, this was a vast improvement. His focus had shifted from merely defeating the Hokages to tackling the greater challenge, countering the impure world reincarnation's undying nature. Haru's mind raced, recalling what he knew of the forbidden technique. Impure world reincarnation summoned the souls of deceased shinobi, binding them to physical forms. These revenants obeyed their summoner without question, wielding near-limitless chakra and invulnerability to death. In the Fourth Great Ninja War, Kabuto Yakushi had used this jutsu to resurrect a host of legendary shinobi, wreaking havoc on the allied shinobi forces. But the technique wasn't flawless. It had weaknesses. First, sealing techniques. While reincarnated shinobi were immortal, a powerful sealing jutsu could bind them, rendering their regeneration moot. Once sealed, escape was impossible. Second, recovery time. Though immortal, A sufficiently devastating attack could delay their regeneration, creating a window for sealing or other tactics. Third, the risk of rebellion. A reincarnated shinobi aware of the jutsu's seals could potentially break free, as Madara Uchiha had during the Fourth War. Similarly, exceptionally powerful individuals, like Hashirama Senshu, could resist or outright ignore their summoner's control, retaining much of their former strength. Haru's eyes narrowed as this knowledge flashed through his mind, strategies forming at lightning speed. The system, meanwhile, was already preparing for the next simulation. Time was precious, every second critical in these trials. He quickly zeroed in on the most viable approach. Of the three weaknesses, only sealing techniques were within his grasp. The others were less feasible. Delaying recovery required overwhelming force. Super Kage level power, which Haru didn't yet possess. Breaking the summoner's control was equally improbable. The reincarnated Hokages, while not at their prime, still operated at Kage level strength. Forcing them to rebel, especially Hashirama with his historical disdain for the Uchiha, was a pipe dream. Sealing was the answer. It was the most practical path forward. Haru's thoughts sharpened, focusing on the sealing techniques he knew. The Uzumaki clan's Fuin Jutsu, the intricate art of sealing, could neutralize even the impure world reincarnation's immortality. He recalled the Reaper Death Seal, a forbidden technique that could trap souls at the cost of the caster's life, or the less extreme Four-Symbol Seal, capable of binding targets indefinitely. Neither was simple, but they were within the realm of possibility for a shinobi of his caliber. On the battlefield, the simulation reset. The root ninjas regrouped, their faces a mix of dread and determination. Denzo's scowl deepened, his single visible eye glinting with calculation. Orochimaru's lips curled into a serpentine smirk, intrigued by the chaos. The masked man, likely an Uchiha himself, though his identity remained shrouded, watched impassively, as if Haru's defiance was merely a wrinkle in his grand design. Haru steadied himself, chakra surging through his veins. The Mangekyo Sharingan spun in his eyes, its crimson glow cutting through the battlefield's haze. He didn't need to defeat the Hokages outright. Not yet. He needed to outsmart them, to exploit the reincarnation's flaws. A sealing jutsu, perfectly timed, could turn the tide. The first Hokage's wood style roared to life again, trees erupting from the earth like living spheres. Obirama vanished, his flying thunder god kunai glinting as he teleported, aiming for Haru's blind spot. Haru's fists crackled with chakra, the 80 gods vacuum attack primed once more. But this time, he held back, conserving his strength. He needed to create an opening, a moment where the Hokage's regeneration lagged, where a seal could be applied. The battle resumed its brutal rhythm. Wood clashed against chakra, space-time flickered against raw power. Haru danced on the edge of defeat, his mind racing with possibilities. Somewhere in this chaos lay the key to victory. Not just survival, but the annihilation of his enemy's undying advantage. He would find it. He had to. The Uchiha clan's fate depended on it. Chapter 52, The Lord of Elements. Increased by 300%. System, start simulation. Haru Uchiha, having finally understood everything, spoke in a low, resolute voice. He reselected his talents and entered the simulation once again. This time, he planned to use sealing techniques to shift the tide. However, while Haru had learned some sealing arts, it was still extremely difficult to seal off the powerhouses of the first and second Hokage. To make matters worse, he was surrounded by enemies. Root operatives, Denzo, Orochimaru, and even Itachi Uchiha were constantly watching him, interfering at every step. Nothing was going smoothly. Yet compared to his earlier simulations, this was still significant progress. Repeated failures to seal and failed simulations did not affect Haru's mentality. He relished the process of strengthening himself through battle. He thrived on clashing with truly powerful foes. With his current strength, he could already have easily evaded the Uchiha clan's extermination night and survived. But that was no longer his objective. His real aim was to sharpen his strength as much as possible in combat, to be prepared for any and all challenges that the future might throw his way. As time passed, Haru had simulated the battle 6 or 7 more times. In the later runs, he calmed down and stopped relying on sealing techniques. Instead, he chose a more straightforward method to test and improve his strength. One reason was that the sealing techniques he'd mastered were still too rudimentary to suppress the first and second Hokage. Another reason was the enemies constantly surrounding him, making seals nearly impossible to execute properly. Again and again, he was ultimately defeated when he ran out of chakra. Haru understood that improving further with his current capabilities was unlikely. If he truly wanted to change the game, there was only one solution. Wait. Wait for a new golden ability. He had seen how much golden abilities could enhance his strength. Otsutsuki physique, Wood style, 80 gods vacuum attack. Each of them had significantly raised his combat power. With such abilities, every challenge became a surmountable obstacle. Now, faced with another impossible situation, he believed the next golden ability would allow him to turn everything around. But acquiring a golden ability was no simple task. Across multiple simulations, Haru encountered numerous purple abilities, and even more white and blue ones. But golden remained elusive. This aligned with his expectations. In life, anything truly worth having never came easily. Having already mentally prepared himself, Haru wasn't discouraged. At last, after more than 10 simulations, Haru obtained his fourth golden ability. Lord of Elements, golden ability. When using elemental ninjutsu, the power is increased by 300%. 300%. Even Haru was stunned when he saw the ability's description. A 300% power boost in elemental ninjutsu. What did that even mean? Even a basic, low-level C-rank ninjutsu would now possess unimaginable destructive force under the effect of Lord of Elements. It would require ultimate techniques from top-tier ninja just to stand against it. He had originally assumed the fourth golden ability would be another KK Genkai like before. Maybe a bloodline limit or even a KK Tota. But unexpectedly, it was the Lord of Elements. Simple. Brutal. And most importantly, devastatingly powerful. Obtaining this ability instantly elevated him to a realm of unmatched power within his rank. He could now even challenge stronger enemies beyond his own level. Haru immediately locked in the golden ability and then randomly selected a few additional skills before entering the simulation again. He couldn't wait to unleash the might of Lord of Elements. Simulation start. As usual, Haru began inside the Hidden Leaf Village military police force's holding cell. Soon, Denzo sent people to silence him. But they fled in terror. Then came Orochimaru with his impure world reincarnation, summoning the first and second Hokage. Beneath the dark night sky, the two legendary Kage stood side by side, emanating an overwhelming aura. With a teleportation jutsu, Haru appeared before them. Only 2 or 3 meters away. Previously, he had been able to deal with Denzo, root ninjas, and even Itachi Uchiha without even utilizing Lord of Elements. But now, facing the impure world reincarnation bodies of the first and second Hokage, he was finally ready to go all out. 80 gods vacuum attack. Right from the start, Haru unleashed the most powerful technique he currently possessed. This time, he was empowered by the newly unlocked golden ability. Lord of Elements. An explosive force erupted instantly. As chakra condensed, radiant white light glowed in Haru's palm. Even before he launched the attack, the oppressive energy shook the battlefield. Even the first and second Hokage, with their immortal impure world bodies, felt a deep and dangerous sense of foreboding. They understood that if they were hit directly, the consequences might be irreversible. Even with regeneration. No hesitation. The two Hokage immediately took action. They were veterans. Battle-hardened. The more powerful the enemy ninjutsu, the more critical it was to attack first and disrupt it before casting completed. But Haru was no longer the same inexperienced shinobi who had first used the 80 gods vacuum attack. After over a dozen simulations, he'd become adept at deploying the technique with minimal prep. He wouldn't have closed in on the Hokage with such precision otherwise. The first and second Hokage launched a joint offensive. Wood style. One of the world's most terrifying KK Genkai. Flying Thunder God. An S-rank space-time ninjutsu. Both were legendary, nearly unstoppable. And now, wielded by two historic titans, they reached heights unthinkable for ordinary shinobi. At the same time, Haru's 80 gods vacuum attack, empowered by Lord of Elements, exploded into action. Giant chakra fists, like mountain-sized meteors, blasted out in all directions. The radius of devastation spanned nearly 100 meters. Denzo, Orochimaru, the masked man, Itachi, and a swarm of root ninja were all caught in the onslaught. Each titanic chakra fist carried immense pressure and thunderous momentum. At first, they seemed distant. Then, with a blink, they were right on top of everyone. Blinding white fists. Dozens of them, hammering down. Obliterating everything they touched. Orochimaru, Denzo, Itachi, and the root ninja were overwhelmed. Even the masked man, who always maintained an air of superiority and claimed to be Madara Uchiha, showed a rare flicker of emotion. None of them had expected Haru to unleash a technique that went beyond the power of most Kage. As the fists surged forward, the stunned spectators scrambled to use teleportation jutsu and evade. But except for the masked man, protected by Kami's spatial defense, the others couldn't escape. Denzo, Orochimaru, the already injured Itachi Uchiha, and the root ninja were all struck. Especially the root shinobi. Individually strong. But compared to Haru, now empowered by the Lord of Elements and nearing Super Kage level, they were nothing. His attacks were utterly unmatchable. This was the 80 Gods vacuum attack. Considered the strongest taijutsu-style ninjutsu. Even Denzo and Orochimaru, both Kage-level combatants, suffered injuries trying to dodge. The elite Jonin of Root had no chance. They took heavy damage or died instantly. The others stared at the center of the battlefield in awe. They had been devastated at the periphery. But the first and second Hokage had been at ground zero. Despite the regenerative power of impure world reincarnation, they couldn't be certain if the two legendary Kage had truly survived. The attack left a cratered battlefield cloaked in thick gray smoke. Mangekyo Sharingan flared as the masked man and Itachi activated them to pierce the haze. Itachi, report. Denzo asked grimly. If even the impure world Hokage couldn't stop Haru, then Denzo had run out of moves. Orochimaru squinted, face uncertain. He had once been confident that he could control Haru's body through summoning, impure world reincarnation. Now, seeing Haru's real strength, he realized how laughably naive he had been. The two Hokage are still alive, Itachi said in a deep tone. Hearing this, Denzo and Orochimaru visibly relaxed. If they were still standing, then Haru's attack hadn't completely destroyed them. There was still hope. At least it wasn't the end. Whoosh! The night breeze rolled in, sweeping away the smoke. At the battlefield's heart, Haru Uchiha stood, calm and composed, eyes gleaming with satisfaction. He was clearly pleased with the Lord of Element's devastating effect. In the distance, the first and second Hokage remained standing. But they were far from unscathed. Chapter 53, either go to war or give in. The second Hokage's left arm was broken, and his right leg was completely gone. Even the first Hokage had lost a leg. They stood in a state of utter disarray. But this wasn't the most terrifying part. What was truly shocking was that the impure world reincarnation, unsummoning, impure world reincarnation technique said to grant immortality and unlimited chakra, seemed to have been overridden. The injuries to the first and second Hokage showed no signs of healing. Or rather, they were healing, but at such a sluggish pace that it was practically unnoticeable. Denzo, Orochimaru, and Itachi Uchiha stared with wide eyes, their lips trembling as they stood frozen, unable to speak. Haru Uchiha had once again shattered everything they thought they knew. To what terrifying level had this young Uchiha reached? Even the masked man, who called himself Madara Uchiha, remained calm only on the surface. The exposed eye behind his mask shimmered with intensity. Clearly, even he couldn't remain indifferent in the face of this scene. Let's go together. Denzo's eyes flashed coldly as he glanced at both Itachi and Orochimaru. Things had progressed to a point where there was no turning back. Haru Uchiha had to die. No one could predict what would happen if Haru was allowed to walk away today. Even the summoning, impure world reincarnation first and second Hokage had suffered crippling damage at his hands. Denzo knew he couldn't possibly face Haru alone. So he turned to Itachi and Orochimaru. If two Kage-level legends weren't enough, they would add a third. If three weren't enough, they would throw in a fourth and a fifth. Surely 5 Kage-level shinobi would be enough. Itachi stepped forward immediately, standing beside Denzo. His loyalty to Hidden Lee Village was unwavering. More importantly, he had a pact with the village. One he was bound to fulfill. Either reason alone was enough to lock him into this path. Denzo was not surprised by Itachi's stance. His gaze now shifted to Orochimaru. If Orochimaru joined, their chances would increase significantly. If he declined, Denzo and Itachi would have to try regardless. Orochimaru smirked and hesitated, his eyes narrowing. I want that kid's body, he said, voice low and greedy. Fine. Denzo replied instantly, without a hint of hesitation. It was an empty promise. He could afford to make as many of those as needed. What happened afterward could be dealt with later. After all, Denzo had never cared about reputation. Very well. Orochimaru's golden eyes gleamed. His long, snake-like tongue slid across his dry lips as he finally agreed. Denzo turned again. Will you help us? This time the question was for the masked man. But the masked man didn't respond. He stood still, silent, as if he hadn't even heard. Denzo said nothing further. He already knew the answer. Just as he'd expected. This enigmatic figure who claimed the name Madara Uchiha would not intervene so easily. And so, Denzo, Orochimaru, and Itachi Uchiha, 3 Kage-level titans, used the teleportation jutsu simultaneously. In an instant, they were at the front lines, standing beside the wounded first and second Hokage, facing Haru Uchiha. Haru's expression was calm, but his eyes burned with anticipation. He didn't fear Kage-level enemies. 2 at once were already within his ability to overcome. But now there were 5. 5 Kage-level shinobi. Could he still handle them as easily as before? Now it was getting interesting. Simulation failed, the words materialized before him again. Even as the Lord of Elements, Haru Uchiha had failed to defeat 5 united Kage-level opponents. Though his 80 God's airstrike, enhanced by elemental mastery, was devastating, none of them dared face it directly. They dodged, countered, and combined their strength to resist. But such a powerful technique drained massive amounts of chakra. Even with Haru's current reserves, it couldn't be used indefinitely. The 5 Kage-level masters worked together flawlessly, opting for attrition over brute force. They whittled down his chakra bit by bit. Eventually, Haru was exhausted. Defeated. But this failure was different. Previously, the infinite regeneration of the summoning, impure world reincarnation Hokage had been his greatest obstacle. Now, that issue was resolved. The power granted by the Lord of Elements overwhelmed even the undead regeneration of summoning, impure world reincarnation. Though he ultimately lost against the overwhelming coordination of 5 Kage-level masters, the process had been far more balanced. Victory no longer seemed so far-fetched. So he initiated another simulation. Again, and again, and again. He tried countless strategies, managing to severely wound 2 of his 5 enemies in one attempt. Yet each time, he fell just short of victory. The 4th simulation finally ended. But the insight he gained was immense. The elemental power he wielded was refining his strength in every direction. With the Uchiha clan massacre drawing near, this ability gave him an edge he would desperately need. After the simulation, he was meant to report to the Hidden Leaf Village military police force and resume duties or take on missions. But after killing the envoy from the Hidden Cloud Village, Haru Uchiha had been placed under house arrest. He'd been advised to remain confined to his quarters. Conveniently, that suited Haru just fine. He needed time to simulate, to train, and to increase his strength layer by layer. So, he didn't resist. As he finished the 4th simulation, Haru immersed himself in reflection, just as he had after every past attempt. It was his routine. Break down what he had learned, identify his flaws, and polish himself. However, what he didn't know was that during this time, the Hidden Cloud Village had already sent an ultimatum. Their message was clear: either go to war with the Hidden Cloud Village, or hand over Haru Uchiha for killing their envoy. They showed no concern for why the envoy had died. Nor did they acknowledge the attempted kidnapping of the Hyuga clan's eldest daughter. To them, the facts didn't matter. They had came to provoke. And in the wake of this pressure, the 3rd Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, had no choice but to convene an emergency meeting. Clan leaders, village elders, and Kijonin, including Kiranai Yui, Yuja Yuzuki, Asuma Sarutobi, Hayate Gecko, and Might Guy, were summoned to discuss their course of action. Lord Hokage, if Hidden Cloud's village wants war, let them have it. Do they think Hidden Leaf Village fears them? The speaker was a clan head advocating for battle. His fists were clenched, eyes wide, face flushed with rage. The sheer audacity of Hidden Cloud's village infuriated him. They had attempted an abduction, failed, and now they had the nerve to issue threats? Hidden Leaf Village was the undisputed top shinobi village. They were not going to be bullied. His declaration resonated with many others present. Exactly. Hidden Cloud Village? Crush them. Let them learn the power of the leaf. Lord Hokage, give the order. We will never surrender. Chapter 54, Classic for the Will of Fire. The more they argued, the more heated their emotions grew. Rage simmered in their voices. They wanted nothing more than to go to war with Hidden Cloud's village. The younger generation, Yuzuki Yuja, Yui Kiranai, and Might Guy, stood to the side, tense but quietly relieved. They had feared that Hidden Leaf Village's elders would actually agree to hand over Haru Uchiha, just to appease the demands of the Hidden Cloud. That would be disgraceful. All of them knew who was truly at fault in this situation. Judging by the current mood, however, things were unlikely to spiral into that worst-case scenario. The village wouldn't sell out one of their own. But just as a sense of hope began to rise, an out-of-place chuckle sliced through the room. Hey. Easy to say. But what about the reality? What right do we even have to fight? Everyone turned. It was Denzo. One of the clan leaders who had been vocally pro-war scoffed in disgust. Denzo, are you afraid? Hidden Cloud's village dares to speak with such arrogance and contempt because of cowards like you. You're the reason outsiders think Hidden Leaf Village can be pushed around. Denzo didn't flinch. His expression was calm, voice measured. Afraid? He said coolly. If I had even a 50% chance of victory, I would fight. Without hesitation. But the question is, do we have even that? After the Nine Tails attack and the 4th Hokage's death, Hidden Leaf Village has never been weaker. Orochimaru, one of the legendary Sannin, has defected. Tsunade is nowhere to be found. Jiraiya wanders God knows where. So now it's just me. And the 3 elders. keeping this place upright? He swept his gaze across the room. Tell me. Can the Hidden Leaf village of today truly stand against Hidden Cloud's village? If war breaks out, do you understand the blow it would deal to our village? To the lives of our shinobi and citizens? And if we lose? He paused, letting the silence settle like ash in the air. Then, he continued slowly, with weight behind every word. You are the clan heads of Hidden Leaf village. The ones who shape our future. You all know. There are many who watch us from the shadows, waiting for a single misstep. If we make a wrong move, we all know what happens next. Even the most hawkish among the clan leaders fell silent. Because Denzo wasn't wrong. Hidden Leaf village, as it stood, was in no position for another war. A loss would be catastrophic. But if we just hand him over like this, what will the other villages think of us? Someone finally asked. Won't our reputation as the strongest shinobi village become a joke? Their concern wasn't out of compassion for the Uchiha. Hidden Leaf village's relationship with the Uchiha clan had always been strained. No, what they truly worried about was Hidden Leaf village's face. Its prestige on the world stage. Denzo's voice was cold. This is the burden we must bear. Either we go to war, or we endure the shame. A murmur spread through the crowd. Enough. The third Hokage's voice cut through the noise, calm yet commanding. He exhaled deeply, then turned his eyes to one man. Hayashi. This incident started because of your Hyuga clan. Tell us. What is your view? All eyes shifted to Hayashi Hyuga. The leader of the Hyuga, father of Hinata Hyuga, who had nearly been kidnapped. The Hyuga clan, holders of the famed Byakugan, were powerful and respected in Hidden Leaf village. Now, their actions, or inaction, would determine how this meeting concluded. Yuzuki Yujao and Yui Kurenai looked toward him as well, a flicker of hope in their expressions. After all, it had been Haru Uchiha who had saved Hinata. He'd risked his life and intervened just in time. Without him, the situation would have turned into tragedy. Logically, emotionally, Hayashi should side with Haru. That's what Yujao, Kurenai, and Guy all believed. But as Hayashi opened his mouth to speak, their hope began to crumble. Even the seasoned elders of Hidden Leaf village and the stoic clan heads were stunned. Only Denzo gave a slight, knowing smirk. The third Hokage remained quiet, observing. Hayashi's words were steady and clear. If sacrificing one life can secure the peace of all Hidden Leaf village, even if that life is mine, I will not hesitate. His words rippled like a cold wind through the chamber. The pro-war leaders rose from their seats in outrage. Hayashi. Do you understand what you're saying? That Uchiha boy saved your daughter. And this is your response? Hayashi remained composed. He addressed the room without emotion. This is not a decision made solely for the Hyuga clan. It is for the sake of all Hidden Leaf village. For the stability of the ninja world. We all know Hidden Leaf village cannot survive another war. I know. I owe a debt to that Uchiha boy. But. His voice faltered slightly, a trace of guilt flickering across his features. I have no choice. For Hidden Leaf village. For peace. I would give my life. Even Hinata's life. Silence fell once more. Denzo's cold logic had been met. But Hayashi's heartfelt conviction hit differently. His personal sacrifice, his willingness to give everything, even his daughter. It moved people in ways strategy could not. And yet, it also twisted something in their hearts. Is peace worth this? Is honor worth a war? Some of the pro-war faction remained unmoved, but their numbers had clearly thinned. Now, the third Hokage shifted his gaze to the final figure who had yet to speak. Fugaku Uchiha. Leader of the Uchiha clan. Silent through the entire meeting. Though the rift between Hidden Leaf village and the Uchiha had grown nearly irreparable, Fugaku's presence today meant one thing. This was no ordinary issue. His word would carry weight. The third Hokage addressed him directly. Fugaku. Haru Uchiha is one of your clan. What do you have to say? Fugaku sat back, arms folded across his chest, eyes half-lidded. He didn't speak. No one dared to press him. Not the elders. Not even the loudest of the clan leaders. Everyone knew. The decision he was about to make was not only critical. It was final. If he agreed to hand Haru over, then the matter would be closed. If he refused, the war hawks would rise again. And the fate of Hidden Leaf village could shift entirely. The silence in the chamber was suffocating. Even the flickering lanterns seemed to dim as they waited. This was the opinion held by the vast majority of those present. However, that did not include Denzo or the third Hokage. The decision to hand over Haru Uchiha had already been made. What followed was just for show. A mere formality. To smooth the process, a delegation had even been sent to persuade the Hyuga clan. It was widely believed that once the Hyuga were on board, there would be no more real resistance. As for the Uchiha clan, it didn't matter. The night of the Uchiha clan's massacre was fast approaching. Soon, the entire clan would be wiped out. What value did their opinions hold now? When the time came, exchanging a single corpse for the peace of all of Hidden Leaf Village would be considered a reasonable deal. Even the most hardened pro-war advocates wouldn't oppose it. Still, curiosity lingered. As the head of the Uchiha clan, what would Fugaku Uchiha decide? Time ticked by. No one dared rush things. They feared a single misplaced word or action could tip events in the wrong direction. After about 15 minutes, Fugaku Uchiha, who had sat in silence for long enough, finally opened his eyes and said in a slow, steady tone, "Though I am the head of the Uchiha clan, I do not have the right to decide the life or death of any individual clan member." "What do you mean by that?" someone asked, clearly confused. Fugaku replied, pausing deliberately between each word, "Let Haru Uchiha decide his own fate." Ridiculous. He's just a kid. How could he possibly understand concepts like sacrifice, peace, or compromise? Someone immediately sneered, voicing what many were thinking. To them, the answer was obvious. One life in exchange for the safety and stability of an entire village? That was acceptable. But if that life was your own, how many could truly accept it? They didn't believe Haru would possess that level of maturity or awareness. Denzo interjected with a scoff, "Patriarch Fugaku, isn't that approach a little too naive?" Fugaku, unmoved, shook his head. "I don't think so." At that moment, Hyuga Hisashi spoke up as well, "I support this. Haru Uchiha shouldn't die in confusion. He deserves to know what he's dying for." "You." Denzo's brow furrowed, his lips parting as he prepared to argue. But the third Hokage raised his hand to silence him. "Enough. Since both Fugaku and Hisashi have spoken, bring Haru Uchiha here," said Sarutobi Hiruzen calmly. "Let's hear what he has to say." Denzo's jaw clenched, but he said nothing further. Bringing him here won't change anything, he thought to himself. The Uchiha brat would die either way. This was merely letting him see the knife coming. A moment later, several Anbu appeared out of thin air, vanishing just as swiftly with the third Hokage's nod. Not long after, they returned, with a young man standing between them. It was Haru Uchiha. As he stepped into the council chamber, Haru's gaze calmly swept across the room. Though he hadn't been informed beforehand, he could guess the situation with startling clarity. In one corner of the room, he caught glimpses of concerned eyes. Yuzuki Ujao, Kurenai Yui, and Might Guy. But far more common were the cold, analytical stares from Hidden Leaf Village's elders and clan heads. Their scrutinizing gazes made the atmosphere oppressive. They stared at this young shinobi who had recently made headlines. Having slain Kurasuke, one of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the Mist, and also killed the envoy from Hidden Cloud's village. Many secretly admired him for it. Everyone present was either a clan leader or a high-ranking official. True powerhouses in the Leaf. Most shinobi would have felt overwhelmed simply standing in their presence. But Haru stood calmly, his expression unchanged, treating them like any ordinary crowd. That alone put him above the majority of Hidden Leaf Village's shinobi in terms of composure. And that's to say nothing of his combat prowess. He had defeated Rika, and dispatched a diplomat from Hidden Cloud's village, both tasks beyond most Jonin. It was a shame. He was an Uchiha, cursed by history to meet a fate that was never truly his to control. "Lord Hokage, Haru Uchiha has arrived," one of the Anbu said respectfully. Sarutobi Hiruzen gave a small nod. "Good." With that, the 2 masked Anbu vanished again in a blur of chakra and wind. Then the Hokage gave a subtle signal. A Jonin stepped forward to brief Haru on the situation. When he finished, Hiruzen looked directly at the young Uchiha. "Haru, this all began because of you. You must understand that. What I want to know now is, what do you want to do?" Haru didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned his gaze to Fugaku Uchiha. Fugaku met his eyes and gave a single, solemn nod. Haru understood. This was the opportunity Fugaku had promised him. The Uchiha clan would not go to war with Hidden Leaf Village over him. That door was shut. All that remained was Haru's own choice. After a long, deliberate silence, Haru finally opened his mouth. His words came out firm and clear. "I don't want to." No one was surprised. In fact, most had expected it. This was a choice between life and death. Who would choose to die? No sooner had the words left his lips than a wave of outraged voices filled the room. "He's just a child. What could he possibly know? We're wasting time giving him a choice. Uchiha brat, do you think you're above sacrifice? Dying for the village. Dying for peace. That's an honor. Do you even understand that?" The noise escalated quickly. Heated voices rose, overlapping in a storm of blame and derision. Slam. The third Hokage brought his hand down on the table. Hard. The sharp sound cut through the noise like a kunai. The room fell silent. Everyone looked around, realizing they had gone too far. For all their power, for all their titles, they had just ganged up on a teenager. Denzo broke the silence with a thin, sharp smile as he turned to Fugaku. "So, clan head Fugaku," he said with mock politeness. "Is this your answer, then?" Chapter 55, Haru Uchiha, "I'll just watch you perform in silence." "Yes." Fugaku Uchiha nodded, stood up, and walked over to Haru Uchiha, placing himself protectively in front of him. His stance made his intentions clear. Haru wasn't surprised. Fugaku was the patriarch of the Uchiha clan. At this point, the relationship between the Uchiha and Hidden Leaf Village had deteriorated to the brink of open hostility. Though Fugaku might not be willing to go to war with the entire village over Haru, he certainly wouldn't stand idly by and watch Haru be thrown to the wolves by Hidden Leaf Village's higher-ups. If word got out that the Uchiha clan leader allowed one of their own to be dealt with without resistance, the clan would erupt in outrage. Fugaku's position as patriarch would be finished. No matter what decision Hidden Leaf Village's council reached today, Fugaku had to take a stand. At the very least, he had to make a show of resistance. So, does the Uchiha clan intend to become the enemy of Hidden Leaf Village? Denzo's half-lidded eyes gleamed with menace. His tone was calm, but the underlying threat was unmistakable. The moment those words were spoken, the atmosphere in the council chamber grew heavy. Everyone present was a major figure in Hidden Leaf Village. Clan leaders, elders, and senior officials. All of them were well aware of the deepening rift between the Uchiha clan and the village. In truth, it was precisely because of this growing tension with the Uchiha that Hidden Leaf Village found itself in a difficult position, forced to make concessions and seek peace with foreign powers just to keep the balance. Without the conflict brewing inside their walls, the Leaf could have stood proud as the strongest village in the shinobi world. Even with the fourth Hokage's death and the disappearance of the Sannin,